Lingua Brutallica is a podcast that uses ethnographic interviews to study language use in the extreme metal community. We are studying a music scene known for its love of themes and topics generally considered offensive, and it is likely that some episodes will touch on topics or opinions some listeners may find tasteless or ethically problematic. Ethnographic researchers aim to adopt the interviewee's point of view so that we can draw out and study the attitudes, beliefs, and practices that are important to them. We want to make it clear that in presenting these conversations here, we do not endorse any of their content. Our aim is to explore the thought processes behind language use in this long-running, international, and yet understudied scene. Hi, and welcome back to Lingua Brutallica with me, Jess Bernie Smith, and my co-host, Wes Robertson.
Good morning.
In this episode, we're talking to Aaron Carey of Nechochwen in West Virginia. Thanks for coming to speak to us, Aaron.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
I appreciate you making the time, especially given the in-West time difference.
Yeah.
Yes, very large time difference, but no, no problem at all.
So just to begin, how would you describe Nechochwen's music if you're introducing it to somebody that, say, knew about metal but had never heard you before? What kind of broad genres would you say that it fits under?
At the current moment, like this album Canal Black that we have coming out, it's probably the most percentage of extreme metal. I don't think it's sufficient to just say it's black metal or it's death metal or folk metal or whatever. But I guess maybe folk metal would be the best tag for that due to, we don't have satanic lyrics and with traditional subjects that black metal is known for, but we, borrow extensively from that style musically. But the themes are more of the history of what's now the United States. So I guess you could say like historical folk metal with acoustic elements. I don't know. That sounds descriptive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so when did you first get into metal music? And, the styles that you've just described, were those the styles of metal that you were first drawn to?
No, not really. I wasn't even aware of, well, at the time, we're talking maybe Bathory and Merciful Fate existed when and I found out about this a little later. I think that I heard some kind of more like glam rock, hard rock type of stuff. I remember hearing Maiden when I was a little kid, and I think in the periphery it had some effect on me. And then later on hearing Guns N' Roses and stuff like that. That was the first concert I ever went to when I was in fourth grade. Was Guns N' Roses on the Appetite for Destruction tour.
Fourth grade.
And fourth grade, yeah. my mom was pretty cool.
Yeah, I bet.
Stuff like that. Yeah, so I was lucky to get to do that. And so right around that same time, I had neighbors that I'd ride the bus to school with that had the jean jackets, and they had Megadeth Peace Cells on their jackets, and Slayer, Hell Awaits, and stuff like that. And I'm like, ooh, what's this? This doesn't look like Guns N' Roses. And Metallica just kind of exploded around here at that time. And I think that was maybe the second concert I went to was Metallica on the Black Album tour. And that was my sister that time that took me to that show. But I started getting into playing guitar at that time. I mean, I was just like, that's what I want to do. I'm not into like basketball. I'm not into, I don't know, whatever that people were into at that age. I think I was 10 and got a guitar, started taking some lessons. And the first thing I wanted to learn was Iron Maiden. I learned most of their early albums as quickly as I could. I got kind of obsessed with that and developed my ear. And as I got a little more into school, I think I felt a little bit isolated from a lot of the other people because I had long hair. I wore, Sepultura shirts and Metallica and stuff like that. And there wasn't too many people into that. My best friend was into all that stuff, and everybody else is, kind of looking at you like you're a freak. And so it wasn't long before I got into death metal because, well, Wes, you look younger than me, but we had this show called Headbangers Ball.
Yeah.
Here on MTV.
Yeah. No, I am a bit younger than you, but I remember Headbangers Ball with, so it was just before kind of everything was on the internet. It was like the one place that I remember being able to find a lot of metal when I was growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. Pre-internet, it was like one night I watched it and they had Immortal Rights by Morbid Angel. And I was like, whoa, this is beyond even like Sepultura and stuff. This is cool. And they had Napalm Death, stuff for the children on there, and Entombed when Clandestine came out. And it was that explosion. I'm not the only one here, of course. This happened to a lot of people, but I was going out and buying Obituary, Pestilence, and like anything I could find. And the big thing for me, my internet, my YouTube or whatever, was Metal Maniacs magazine. And to sidestep that, one of the writers that I grew up reading was Marty Ritkanen from Binder and Recordings, who's been releasing Nechochwen's music for 12 years now. Became one of my best friends. And so that link back to that magazine, you'd see a picture of some Dutch band or some Brazilian band or whatever. And it's like, I got to check that out, So as I was going through all of this, there was a local band called Dethroned, and I'd see their flyers around town. The drummer was very ambitious and really wanted to promote this stuff. And, there's inverted crosses and goat heads and stuff. And I'm like, wow, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
What's this about? So, it's a small town. I live in, a town of 2,500 people, and there's not very many people in this entire region of West Virginia. It's a very narrow strip of land here, and everybody eventually knows everybody else. So I got into this band playing guitar, and they were writing what I felt and still feel is really high quality death metal songs, like just that cusp before everybody started doing blast beats and getting real technical, like more the old school stuff. And that was my first couple of shows was with that band. And it was quickly, I'm talking within 6 months, like, hey, did you hear Emperor's demo? Did you hear this band Enslaved? Have you heard Samael? Have you heard Impaled Nazarene and Pyogenesis and all this stuff that was coming out? And it was like, oh, let's be black metal now. So everybody just shifted within 6 months, like, that stuff's cool, but this is cooler. Let's do this. This is more edgy and dangerous. So that phase of my life didn't last super long because I went off to college and I wanted to get serious about getting a degree, and like that's the next step. So when I got down there, I found some guitar classes to take because I was kind of irritated growing up that like I could figure out all these riffs by using my ear or reading a tablature or something, but I'm like, why don't I know what these notes are? Why don't I understand theory? And there was like no internet to look that stuff up. And so I decided to major in classical guitar, and that didn't shift me away from metal. It like supplemented it and gave me knowledge of like how to structure things in music. And I mean, the old school metal approach of writing a riff and putting it with this and putting it with this, that's great. And I love old school death metal and thrash and stuff, but I like broader structures as well. And I really liked some of the experimental bands that I first heard around that time, like Arcturus and Borknagar and even Emperor that I was mentioning. They went into this kind of broad epic territory as well. So that's kind of where I went with that. And so that's my association with all this. And I guess to sidestep that too, that first band that I was in, it's like, oh, I'm in a band now and I'm doing extreme metal type of stuff, like, I've been wanting to do since I started playing guitar. I want to write some songs too. And I'm going to write it about what I'm interested in, which is the local Indian tribes of this area in history and prehistory. And that became a theme right away. I did a Native American flute piece for the first demo I was on with them. And, you know, it's kind of weird to put that element in, but I look back at it now and it's like, well, nobody else in this area was really doing death and black metal that I knew of, at least outside of Pittsburgh. And to put this Native element in there, that's kind of weird for the time. It's like really an unusual thing. And so that's how I got my start in what I'm doing now.
Your bandmates like cool with those ideas? Did they like that kind of linking right away, or was it kind of seen as a bit odd?
Strangely enough, they were like, cool. I think one of them was like, I'm into satanic philosophy. And the bass player is like, he's passed away now, but he's like, I'm an atheist. It's like, well, he would write some songs that were real dreary and hopeless and dismal and, you know, kind of there's nothing after you die, sort of. We're just walking around on the earth until we expire. So some songs were like that. Some were more, you know, I guess evil and pagan type of things. And then I would write things that were from either a war or a spiritual philosophical state or standpoint of some ancient native philosophy. It was a weird mix, but it worked somehow. Yeah. I remember this shirt. It said like Black Metal Mafia Native American. And I was like, that's kind of paradoxical, but I don't know. I was 15. Everything in metal, just playing metal with the band was cool enough for me. I didn't really think too much into it at the time.
So was there anything that I suppose drew you to the genre initially that made you want to spend so much of your life committed to producing music that's, you know, we could call in a blanket sense metal?
Was there anything like specific about like the content of the music?
Yeah,
or, like,
either like the yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be the generic thing of being a teenager and there's the rebellion thing, but I was never really like a rebellious person. I've always been pretty calm and passive and not really angry about much, and I didn't really have much to rebel against other than the topics of a lot of the things that I grew up studying about, you know, what happened to Indian tribes and injustice and lack of much social justice at the time, even for tribes and for minorities in the early 90s. But I mean, how aware was I really of that at 14, 15? I don't know. I was just kind of like first learning about that and how shitty some sectors of society can be to other people. Just starting to wrap my head around that. But you know, that wasn't why I listened to metal. I wasn't like trying to make my parents mad or something like that, you know. I wish that I had a better answer for this, but I think what really spoke to me was the harmonies in guitar. Felt like you were swinging a sword or something like this. Felt like power. Like you can play these notes, and then I have the knowledge of what notes go over top of that to create bigger things like chords. I guess kind of like how people that are destined to be writers feel a power in how they convey a character in a story. That I could come up with a melody that if it sticks in my head all week, then it's probably going to stick in somebody else's head too. And they're going to come back to it and listen to it. I didn't get that from the predominant music in this area, which was probably country and pop and rap. I've never been into those styles very much. Now, as a music teacher, I'm around those styles a lot, and I don't like reject them or anything, but it's not my main thing. My main thing's always been metal and classical that draws me in. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but the way that I've always thought about it is these stories that I'm telling, like if you take, for example, Lost on the Trail of the Setting Sun from Heart of Akamon, or Generations of War from the new record, maybe Weeping Eye or Red Ochre from Azimuth's. What other genre could I like convey that with? You know what I mean? I couldn't do that with country music, and no offense to country music, I couldn't do it with jazz. I don't think. But the other genre that could work is, you know, the first album was completely acoustic, Algonquian Mythos, and yeah, this one here, Algonquian Mythos was, you know, there's some organ pieces, there's some a cappella stuff there, there's some like dark folk. I know some people I've used the term neo folk because that's what everybody called it back then. They're like, that's not that, that's a different thing, that's this band is neo. So I don't know what you call it, but like somber sounding acoustic guitar, especially steel string acoustic guitar. Albums I grew up with by like Phil Keaggy and Michael Hedges, Alex DeGrassi, people like that. It wasn't always dark, but it was sophisticated, and it told a story through music without even needing any vocals. That and these weird classical guitar pieces I come up with, those are like tone poems to me. Like I can picture a scene, like Battle of Fallen Timbers or something, or I can picture a scene of like the Weeping Eye design from Mound Builder times into Mississippian Fort Ancient culture times. That's like my musical tattoo design, for lack of better. That's, I don't know. I don't have a better way to describe it, but that's the way I see it. Or my brand. What are those things called? NFTs or something. Like the musical version of this, you know, this freaking skull on a pole that was at the mouth of a river saying, you know, stay out of here, we will kill you. What style of music? Jazz? No. Like EDM? No, it doesn't do it. But metal, the mighty metal of death is what gets those things across. And you know, I hear this kind of stuff in like The Chasm. I don't know if you listen to that band, The Chasm, but just otherworldly, the beyond the realm of death type of stuff that just always gave me a chill of like, I don't know, that stuff's cool beyond anything else. And it doesn't matter whether it's classic Priest and Maiden and Slayer and Merciful Fate, whatever, or if it's the newest stuff. I like stuff that has kind of a dark edge, not like just gore, murder, and killing and stuff, but like the dark side of humanity and the dark side of spirituality. That's what I think conveys my music. That's what sucked me in, because I think a lot of people can relate to this too. When I first got Altars of Madness and Blessed Are the Sick, it was kind of scary. Like, should I be listening to this stuff? Is this like damaging to my karma, or to my, like, you know, is some deity someday going to say, you've lived a good life, but if you remember that song about vomiting on the cross that you always liked, probably wasn't very good, so you're going to have to go to hell. So that scariness is like what kind of drugged me in to metal music in general.
This actually links to kind of what we were going to ask next is, you know, were you said you were writing lyrics quite early on about, you know, Native American mythos and stuff. And now you're talking about, you know, some of the experience I think a lot of us have of opening up our first metal album book that kind of is like, oh no, I can't show my parents what this song's about. Like, were you paying attention to the lyrics of the metal songs you're listening to quite early? Was the lyrics and the lyricism important to you? As you know, obviously the guitar work was as a guitarist, but when did you start to really focus on the lyrics?
Wow. Well, apparently not super early. The other day I was like, I had like songs from Tomb of the Mutilated and The Bleeding going through my head, and I'm like, oh my God, I was like singing that stuff when I was like 15, 16. This stuff is so nasty. There's some of the lyrics, and I'm not like against it. It's art, you know, it's art and there's freedom of speech. But I was like, man, that was pretty shocking. It's just what happens when you get old and you become a dad, and you're like, would I want my kid listening to that? I don't know, but I loved it.
For sure.
So was I paying attention? I think I was more to the cadence, the rhythmic flow of how a song, how a vocal line should go over a riff, more than the words themselves. Because, you know, I love to sing along with Retribution by Malevolent Creation. And again, there's some pretty nasty stuff going on in that album. And I wasn't really fully locking in on how dark some of that stuff was. But, you know, not all bands were like that too. You know, there's some bands that went in different directions, like Cynic. And like after, say, Leprosy by Death, like I'm a huge Death fan. Like I got into them pretty early on, and of course, you know, Scream Bloody Gore, you know, zombie and gore subjects and things like that. But you get into human and individual thought patterns, even spiritual healing, very intelligently written, very deep type of things, and I think maybe I paid more attention to that kind of stuff. And more than anything, I would say the historical stuff that shouldn't surprise you with what I write, but learning about Alexander the Great, for example, from Maiden, and lots of different things, you know, different languages, different cultures that Iron Maiden alone brought to a young metalhead kid, you know, young metalhead kids all over the world. If you pay attention to that stuff, you learn about culture. And, you know, watching a game show, quiz show, it's like, I'll know the answer to that question because of the Maiden song. That's pretty amazing. So I think I was paying attention to that stuff more. Some bands were just flat out hard to really latch onto. One really good example, Carcass. Their early stuff was medical textbook stuff. Like, yeah, I could remember the words, but I had no idea what they meant.
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, did you like that, or did you dislike that?
I thought it was super cool. I did. Like Corporal Jigsaw Quandary. Like nobody else in my 9th grade class would know what the hell I was talking about if I said Corporal Jigsaw Quandary. But you know, I felt like a coroner or something. I felt like I knew things, like I could pass my exams for med school in 9th grade because I listened to Carcass records.
I mean, there's some truth to that. Like when I was studying when I was going to apply to grad school, I was taking like practice tests for this thing called the GREs, and there's like a math section, which I'd forgotten everything, and this English vocab section. And I remember going through the practice things like, oh, I know that's an album title. I know that word. Like ossuary. Yeah. Oh yeah, I know what an ossuary is. That's a song. I know that because there's a song called The Ossuary.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know what that is. And like the amount of words I knew that just happened to be like, oh, Apostasy. Yeah, it's a Behemoth album. Yeah, easy. I know what that is.
Yeah, very true. Deathspell Omega, stuff like that, you know. Carcass, they're talking about like skeletal growths. Where else does that come up in your entire life? But I remember that sticks out in one of their songs. Sure. And I guess social awareness, social justice issues through Napalm Death. They were bringing things up that maybe more from an English perspective, but I had no idea of these things that they were, you know, really fired up about enough to make music. And if the riffs are awesome and it's just, you know, grinding, cool stuff, you know, you can be more open to the message that they're giving, which I guess could actually turn out dangerous as well if they're giving you know, some sketch ideas or something. But, not that band in particular does, but there were a lot out there. So I think that I don't know where I'm going with this, but
No.
I like really latched onto some bands, and I have close friends now that to this day, songs from 30 some years ago, if I say a line from this complex like atrocity song, they'll be able to finish that.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Mm. Well, you said that you're really open to a lot of variation in lyrical content metal, which of course, is probably necessary because there is so much variation. But, you just mentioned that, there obviously is a danger in being open to lyrical content that is potentially harmful. So, do you find that there is a line where you think like, okay, well, this kind of isn't really about, freedom of speech anymore. This is like, lyrical content that just doesn't make for good metal lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one of the fundamental I guess pillars of being an American is, from the time I was born, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. That's definitely true, that we should have artistic expression. So as much as I don't like it, I've always been like, that's up to people to listen to what they want to listen to, even if I don't necessarily agree with it. Because I can make my own choices too. I can turn it off. And there have been bands where I've been like, I'm not listening to this, because like that comes from a completely ignorant standpoint. But there's not really a cut and dry line between this is acceptable and that's not acceptable. And it's a really weird gray area there. So what was the original question again about that?
Oh, just at what point does it, not become about freedom of expression, and it's more about just, lyrics that are harmful or, simply not good?
Just like to you more than
to you,
not on a legal standpoint, but like just
like
where
do I draw that line?
Yeah. Not like what lyrics should be banned, not that. But like what lyrics make you go, okay, you know what? Even though this music's really good, I don't really want to,
I think when it starts to target a particular demographic of people, or it's advocating not just stories, not just like horror stories or whatever, but advocating to do this specific thing to a person or an animal or something like that, and like a torture, cruelty type of situation in the lyrics. And I'm so out of the loop with anything like that I really haven't heard anything like that in years. I mean, maybe if I went back through my record collection, I might find something that was, wow, I never realized that these guys were racist, or these guys were this or that. But I don't know. I think I paid pretty good attention to that kind of stuff, and wasn't just like, oh, so and so says I shouldn't listen to this band because they're misogynist or they're this or that. Like, I would actually check it out and find out, well, what's the deal? I think a really good, almost mainstream example of that is Type O Negative. Think of how popular they ended up being, and how they got a lot of radio and MTV play. They got big tours and stuff like that. All I read about them before I actually heard them was when Slow, Deep, and Hard came out, and people were writing into Metal Maniacs, and there was this big uproar about they're sexist, they're shitty guys, they advocate for rape and stuff like that. If you listen to those lyrics on there, that's one that you really have to make your decision on. Is he advocating for like rape of women, or is he just painting this character story of like he was really hurt by a woman, and these are the emotions that this fictitious guy was going through? And at the time I was like, I need to watch out for that, because I've never even heard of a band being like sexist or whatever at the time. Remember, I'm like 13 or something at the time. I don't know much of what's going on yet. But when I first heard them, it was Bloody Kisses, and I was like, is this band that was supposed to be like shitty rapists or something? Like, I don't get that vibe from this. It seems like they like love women. So I don't know. I mean, and there's been other bands I'm sure that have had some sort of like weird racist kind of NS sketch type of viewpoint, and then later on they're like, I don't want to be like that. That's not what I believe anymore. And they kind of reform, and you know, I think should be given another chance, unless it's like really blatant stuff that turns me off forever. Like, nah, this band sucks. Like, I don't want anything to do with what they're putting out in the world. But I don't know, maybe bands are hearing a lot of stuff and they're 13 years old or something like that, and then later on they're like, no, this stuff I was hearing, that was garbage. Like, we're not about that anymore. So I think that's happened, and I'm not going to name any names, but I know some bands that's been the case. Yeah.
I mean, you can see in the lyrics of some bands that over the years, kind of, you can see the themes change and stuff like that over time.
Sure. Yeah, I've known plenty of individuals that fall into that category as well in their personal life. Went from one, pretty questionable philosophy on life to a much different one, and usually it's through another person that comes into their life, I think. So yeah, I hope that answered that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because, it relates to our the other question we wanted to ask, which is related to this, which is, that given that a lot of research has argued that metal often takes a kind of distance from its lyrics, we were wondering like what your position is on your relationship to your lyrics, because, based on, our previous conversations, it sounds like you are, really quite connected to the lyrics that you're producing, particularly because they're, based in some sense on your ancestry.
Yes. I was thinking about this earlier today, actually, and not even in context of like talking to you two today. There have been times where, well, I'm sure you're aware that it takes us forever to make an album. We're like really slow, and it's my fault because I write the music and I take a long time and I get sidetracked very easily. Which you can probably tell from talking to me for a few minutes. I get sidetracked very easily. So as far as that, sometimes, well, this is how it works. I come up with the musical ideas, and I'll go and Andrew, the other half of this project, or Johannesson, I'll go down to his studio in Ohio once a week, and we meet up and work on whatever. So if I have a song, I'll do like a scratch demo, rough guitar idea, and then he puts down the drums and the bass, and then I put proper guitars, and then we start layering. So when a song is formed and it's like kind of on my shoulders of like, okay, you're writing this stuff, so what comes next? I have to have the answer to that. And if I don't have much time that week to be deep and philosophical and to come up with something meaningful that I'm passionate about, and the week just flies by, I'm like, oh, it's Monday again, I have to go down there tonight, I don't have any lyrics. I hate that feeling, and I don't want to feel obligated to just write something that fits, or something mediocre. So that can take me a long time because I don't always immediately feel what that music is supposed to be lyrically about. I'd like to say that I'm some master composer that has this big vision of how everything. I'm not. In fact, we always describe these songs as it's this big block of wood, and we carve it away until we find the song that's inside, rather than the other way around. And I never set out to say, I'm gonna write this song about some chief in that lived in New York or something like that. It's never like that. It always becomes about something or someone later on. And I think what I need is some time to hear the primitive versions of these songs and listen to them in the car, listen to them through headphones, and then words gradually come to me. And it's usually finding that rhythmic cadence. And one of Andrew's pet peeves is when the lyrics go right along with the riff. Like a lot of people complain about Black Sabbath, early Black Sabbath, that Ozzy did that a lot. So I try to avoid doing that, and try to come up with, well, what flow is this going to be over top of this riff? And then it's weird. It's like words come out of the wind, and oh, this word here, and it's slowly the song writes itself lyrically in my head. Once I have a general theme, I sit out on my front porch and I relax and I listen to the parts over and over in my headphones, and I just start writing a poem, essentially. Not even necessarily a rhyming poem, but little things for each part. And at that point, it becomes enjoyable to do. I can't force it or anything like that. But my favorite part is taking this down there, and I don't really play in a band proper. It's like back in the day, if Led Zeppelin's all sitting in a room writing songs together, the Beatles or something writing together in a room. I don't really have that element very often because there's only two of us and we don't have a live metal band lineup type of thing or anything. So when I sit down there and I'm like, here's the lyrics I have, what are your thoughts? Do you think you could come up with something better here for the way this flows? And he'll come up with a really cool hook or a really cool word or something in there that I listen to it back later and I'm like, so thankful I got to work with him on this, because I think a lot of what you're hearing is like after an editing process, a very informal editing process of one of my best buddies that gets what I'm trying to do artistically and helps that stuff come out, because I don't have the clearest vision from the get-go. I don't know if people who say that they do, if that's really like these genius people, Shakespeare or somebody, they can write all this stuff and they just write volumes out of their head. If that happens because they have a vision of all that, or if it just evolves over time, because that's the only way I can figure out to do it and make this work for me.
I'm a little bit surprised to hear that, actually, because in reading the liner notes and stuff, I got the impression that a lot of the songs you've written had kind of very clear motives, which I'm seeing they do, but they came out kind of afterwards. But what about you have songs, for instance, I remember you one on the death of Tecumseh. Is that like even for that song, did that come out after? It wasn't, because when I read the notes, I thought, okay, you set out to make the song about this historical event. Was it the opposite, that you made the song and then it happened to become about the historical event?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Basically every song.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I come up with these guitar riffs and they're weird, like little things, because I teach a lot, and I teach a lot of lessons. And if there's a little gap in between lessons and I have a guitar in my hand, or if I'm just sitting around the house, this little part will come together and I'll either write it down or I'll make a video on my phone, come back to it later, and they piece together. And I basically have the whole thing laid out. And then it's like, okay, this song sounds cool. What's it about? What's it about lyrically? Should it even have any lyrics? Mm-hmm. Great example of that, Shkimota from Heart of Akamon. Very unusual acoustic, largely acoustic piece with it's kind of progressive sounding though. That song has a little bit of lyrics in it, and I won't get into the whole thing. It's a Shawnee lore about Kokomfina, her grandmother, weaves this net that gets unraveled every day. And at the end of the world, it won't get unraveled, and it will come down to the earth, and it will gather all the people who are worthy to take them to the sky world, and everybody else will fall through to death for eternity. There might be some, influence of the rapture or something in that. But there's very few actual lyrics. I wrote an entire songs full of lyrics and sang them. And I have a demo version of that song that has lyrics all through it. And I hated it. I hated it. I said, I can't put this out. I can't put this out. It's a cool idea. The words are cool. It's too much. There's too many lyrics. It's too many melodies going at the same time. So we took them all out except those little parts. And I was like, I love it. That's great. That's all it needed. It needed like 2 or 4 lines in the whole thing. So I struggled with that one big time. October 6th that you were talking about, I think that, well, it's been 7 or 8 years ago now that we were even writing that stuff. I think that was something where I had revisited a lot of the books that I brought this one out. This is the first one I ever read when I was 12 or 13. This is the first book I ever read about Tecumseh, and I probably have 15 books on Tecumseh, something like that. But this one got my heart, and I really got a lot out of it. And this is my first examples I ever saw of any Shawnee words were in this book, or any Shawnee names. I think at the time I was revisiting a lot of that stuff, and at whatever point I was at in the book, it was about the death of Tecumseh. And you start thinking about that stuff, and you realize that, you know, maybe the music that you're writing is coming out at that time for a particular reason, depending on how out there or spiritual you are. That I just happen to be reading this important passage, and maybe the two things are happening at the same time for a reason. And like, wow, you know, I feel really moved because, you know, Tecumseh tried to give his people so much hope. Like, he knew as a prophet that he was going to fall in battle the next day, and he told everybody, fight on. Here is the ramrod from my flintlock. You need to run over to me and tap me with this when I fall in battle, and I will rise again, which he knew wasn't true, but they needed to have some encouragement, because he's like, you know, I'm going to fall in battle. You're going to see it. You need to bring me back. And that kept everybody's spirits up. And I forget every single detail of this, but basically his body was hidden from the enemy so that he wouldn't be scalped and mutilated and pieces of his body taken for trinkets. They put somebody else in his place, and they took him aside and hid him. And that's why the song title is not about the day of his death. It's about the day after. He died on the 5th. And during that time, there was great mourning and a private burial and things like that. And I don't know, it just moved me. I thought of that scene in my mind, and I thought, you know, this piece that I'm writing, it's not the most somber thing. It's not like a doom type of feel to it, but it's somewhere between that and uplifting. It's somewhere in the middle, depending on the part of that song. Like, this music really fits that theme really well. How would I get that across lyrically? You know, it's kind of intimidating. That's a really deep topic to try to present in a naked song like that. That's not a black metal song with, you know, it's like sung and harmonies, and you can hear the words. And yeah, I was kind of nervous about that one. And I was also nervous that most of that album was really heavy, and throwing a song that's essentially like a folk ballad in there. And I thought, are people going to hate this? And some people say it's their favorite one on there, and it's not even a metal song. So I'm glad some people enjoyed it. But no, that's a really good point. And sometimes I forget about these things. They come out and I listen to it as a finished product, and I think, you know, I can't really remember all the details of how this came to be. But I do know that I come up with the music. I don't know if I've ever come up with lyrics. I'm trying to think of an example of something where I came up with the lyrics and then wrote the song later to match that. I don't know if I could do that. Yeah.
For anyone who is curious, by the way, who's listening, the book that he showed was called Panther in the Sky. So by, let's hear.
James Alexander Thom.
James Alexander Thumb. So if you're curious what that is, because yeah, we unfortunately don't have any visuals. So yeah, Panther in the Sky. So I broadly speaking though, with these themes, one of the most notable things about your lyrics, of course, is that you're investigating Native American, especially Shawnee traditions, history, and spirituality. Of course, in metal, as you've said, traditional ancient cultures, especially mostly of European ones, are fairly well represented, but Native American cultures is not. So what was kind of the impetus for investigating Native American and Shawnee culture so thoroughly in your lyrics? And why does metal serve as such an appropriate vehicle for the exploration of these cultural practices?
Well, on the first point, there seems to be like an explosion right now, actually, of Native bands. There's like a ton now, and I've what was it, Thanksgiving Day on Sirius XM, that show Bloody Roots, Ian Christie. I got into my car and they were playing our new song, and I was like, whoa, that's really cool. We haven't even released that yet. And you're playing it on there. He had quite a few bands, including Testament, a very well-known band, was on there. But there were a lot. Is that Blue Hummingbird on the left was one of them, and all kinds of bands that have come out of nowhere. Well, I can't say that. I don't know if they came out of nowhere. I just didn't know of them before, and I'm not real in the loop. I'm a little older now, and I have a harder time following everything that's out there. But I know there's way more than there were a few years ago. I didn't really know of any. Well, as far as the other part of the question, though, this is researching this stuff and learning about this, and going to these different historical places around here. It's been my thing for so many years as a hobby outside of any music or whatever. It's like, oh, I have some free time and I want to go out in the woods. Well, where am I going to go? Well, I'm going to seek out a place that I know was a camp, or a place that I know two bodies of water came together, which would have been a camp, and I start to see the lay of the land through a more like archaeological perspective, or frame of mind of like, where did people like to be? And you start finding signs of that. You start learning where petroglyphs are. You start learning where flint and arrowheads and pottery and things like that are. And it's fairly common to find that stuff here, believe it or not. I don't know if there is a parallel thing in Australia with Aboriginal culture. It's something that I don't know enough about, and I should be asking you all some questions about that. But anyway, it's kind of the thing that I nerd out about, is these details. And it's not just history in general. I don't like really get too excited reading books about the Civil War, or even like world history, not to sound narrow-minded. I mean, obviously, where I grew up, my grandparents were in World War II. So we learned a lot about what caused the First and Second World War. My dad was in Vietnam, so I know a lot about that era. And we learned a lot about the American Revolution in this country growing up. My thing was, from the time I started reading that book, I started reading the narratives of America, and it became, okay, here's the best way I can describe it. When you go to a record store, you're probably not looking for like Adele and stuff like that. You're like, I want to see some like rare King Diamond stuff, or I want, I don't know, some demo that I always wanted from this band or something, or like, oh wow, they have like Eucharist or something cool that you don't see all the time in a record store. I'm going to pick that up. When I go to bookstores, like I look for niche things, like authors from the late 1700s, early 1800s, and I find them sometimes. I find them in these antique stores or in my area, and they're, from like the early 1800s, and you look it up, they're worth a couple $100, and you get it for $10. That's like my like record store thing. is to find these historical books. And I look through it and I'm like, is there any mention of like any of my ancestors in here? Like, I want to know what they were doing. Here, I know general things, but I want to know specifics. I want to, besides just where did they live and like what did they do and stuff. I wanted to know, and I found some things in books like that. So again, I nerd out about that stuff when I read it, and it's just the most interesting topic to me, along with prehistory in general, and local archaeology and arrow point types and pottery types and things like that. And I don't know if I know how to write much about anything else. Like, I did that Coldfells album. That project ended up falling apart and kind of wasn't the best ending with that band. It kind of burnt some bridges and things. But lyrically, I got an opportunity to write poetic, almost literature type lyrics that weren't about Indians. And it was hard. It was really hard. It took me a long time. And I love how it turned out, but I was like, I can't wait to write about, what I'm used to writing about. So, and the other part was, why is metal a good vehicle for that? Okay. And well, I'll give my connection with that. Two things really stick out to me. Okay. One is when the Karelian Isthmus came out, Amorphous, the first Amorphous full length. And I heard a song from that on a compilation that blew my mind. And I was just like, this is the most awesome death metal. It's epic. It's not gory. It's not even necessarily brutal, but I got that CD, and the first full song on there made me want to like swing an axe in battle. And I was like, nothing else conveys that dark story. You watch movies and, some Braveheart type of movie or something, and there's a symphonic score going in the background, and it always has like a Celtic type of feel to me, those things, those battle scenes. But outside of that, where people that you're watching are portraying the action with some sort of battle type music, think of a bolt thrower song. How could that not be metal? It can't be anything else. It's just, and again, case in point, the song that you asked about Tecumseh, October 6th, that one I don't think would be a good metal song, and we didn't make it one. We made it like a folk song. So I like having a project that stuff is acceptable. I don't think a song that sounds like October 6th would fit well on a bolt thrower record. It definitely wouldn't. It wouldn't. So that's one thing, is I guess early Amorphous and bolt thrower, both really, really good example of not what they consider war metal now, but in my mind, it was like metal about wars. At the time, early 90s stuff. And the other thing was the tribe group that we don't meet up anymore very often. We've all scattered so much over the years, but going back from 1997, 98 through about the time the Oto record came out, 2011 maybe, we were meeting more frequently. And the guy who was our leader, my mentor, Chris Allen, Andaqua. This was his band, Migos, and he just told me that they're back together now, apparently, and going to be playing in the Pittsburgh area here soon. This is their demo. It's called Return of the Thunderers, 1999. Migos. Migos is from Migosawen, which is Shawnee for the Shawnee fighting arts. It's basically martial arts, Native American martial arts. The art of war, the art of hand-to-hand fighting and messing people up. This is their full length. Sorry about the glare. Open Season. This came out, I don't know when this came out, maybe 2000, 2001. And that's a nice picture of them here with a long sword and a musket on the back of there. You can see that out in the woods of Pennsylvania, the Laurel Highlands. The reason I'm bringing this up is, I'm in a group I was in college that had nothing to do with the subject matter that I'm exploring now, and just trying to keep that band together and just write some. I don't know. We weren't very together, but I had a demo and I was like, "Here's the stuff we're doing." They were listening to that. That sounds good, man. You guys need to come up to Pittsburgh and play. And I think the vocalist. Well, for example, Shumak Wawakochite. That's not a very common name to hear for a singer of a metal band, because that's his Shawnee name. His name's Barry. And I think at the time he was going into incantation. I think he was playing an incantation at the time or something too. But anyway, these guys were using our names from our group. I went by Nechochwen. They didn't call me Aaron. They called me Nechochwen in this group. And these guys were using that for their music project. And to see these song titles, it wasn't until I saw them play that I got this demo. I didn't even know that they had one. And when I looked at it, I was like, this is a little different, because I think the drummer, who's good friend of mine, was playing in Rotrevor at the time. And Rotrevor really wasn't about native topics. So I started seeing these Tedekwi Monato and Nisa Madakwi, these Akamon, these native Hichiti and Algonquin words. It's like, you could do that? To make metal about this? It's like, I guess I've always kind of wanted to do that, but not to that extent. And that was the big thing for me, is, as you can probably relate to, was the words. I didn't grow up hearing these words. And I was like, you guys kind of did in your family, like, let's speak that language. So I started learning more and more stuff. And that was the bridge for me, is when you go out and have an experience and you speak a language, you're speaking words of a language that was spoken in this area for a very long time that no longer is. And even out in Oklahoma, I think there's only about 200 native speakers left the last time I checked. It's for your Australian audience, or for anybody else, that, a lot of these tribes were moved out of here in 1830 and relocated to Missouri, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And there's very few tribes. There's the Monacan and one branch of the Cherokee that still has their ancestral homeland in the east. And I think the Pawgasset in Connecticut. There's not very many. Most have been relocated. And so I started learning ancient languages through text messages, because those guys live an hour and a half away from me, and we would meet up a couple times a month. But in between, I'd say, let's text in this language. So I had these notebooks and I wrote down everything that was used, and I have like extensive notes because I really wanted to learn it. And to make things even more confusing, is the dialect that we're using is very old and kind of archaic, no longer used. And that's what I call Mountain Shawnee Lenaupe dialect. And some of the words are pronounced differently, and some of them are different words altogether. So how do you go about learning a form of a language that's no longer spoken, and the people who spoke it, a lot of them died through disease and starvation and warfare? How do you get to know that? So I had some sources. I used whatever sources I can to come up with this stuff. And it's really, really interesting stuff, but I don't know if I'm going beyond the scope of your question right now.
Well, they're actually kind of jumping to a question that we had a bit later. So I'm actually just kind of move forward and hop into that, which is that, what is the actual process of writing metal in Shawnee? Like how do you choose words and phrases that feel metal or that fit kind of this metal music out of, you know, the vast range of terms that are available? What process is involved of making this language fit, you know, a metal theme or a metal feel or, you know, metal riff?
Well, I'm not a fluent speaker. I'm not even, you know, highly knowledgeable, and I'm not very conversational with it either, because I have a lot stacked against me as far as making that happen. But some of the things that I have learned seem to flow in a musical way, and I've had it described to me that that's one of the algic languages that kind of flows like French. It's kind of musical, you know. So and knowing that you accent the second syllable of the word and such like that, such things like that, helps you to you know, kind of move the lyrics over top of the riff. But it takes a lot of, for me, it takes a lot of study and like consultation. Like, am I saying this right? You know, I need a check on this stuff from somebody that's more knowledgeable than myself, and I definitely say that that he is, and always has been, the most knowledgeable person on the topic that I've ever met, and I would say in any state. highly knowledgeable person that I was. Backstory on that too: the first band that I was ever playing in, just prior to that, you know, I'd had a lot of conversations with my family about my great grandma and stuff, and the time that my mom spent with her and stuff. And you know, she was Indian, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we don't have any Indian tradition. We don't have like reservations and things. And they're like, well, you can trace it back and learn more about it, but back when we were kids, like, you didn't really talk about it very much, because that was like the worst thing you could be. Nobody wanted to admit to being that. You couldn't own land back then, and people were very racist against certain ethnic groups, and that was one of them. So I don't know, I think that's kind of the nature of genocide, is not just blatant murdering of a people, but killing of their culture by making it unacceptable. So that was a big revelation for me. Like, what do you mean? Didn't you ask her all this stuff? Like, what her grandparents and great grandparents were doing? No, we were just kids, and we weren't supposed to talk about that very much. And so this made it very hard for me in a more accepting period of time that we live in now versus 60, 70 years ago, when my mom and her generation were kids, and my granddad, he'd be over 100 now. Back then, he said, yeah, you didn't talk about that. So I'd ask him all these questions. He's like, I wish you could talk to my cousin. He knew more. Things like that. But this is so frustrating. So I have to rely on historical sources and stuff, and my friends that I meet. So that's where I'm going with this. Is when I've joined that first band, that the drummer was like, you need to write to this guy that plays in Rochefort. He plays death metal, he plays the drums, and he's an Indian. You should write to him. I was like, okay, cool. So I started writing, and he wrote back pages and pages of stuff. All this, I was like, this is the most interesting stuff ever. And we've been friends ever since. So he's been like a great consultant for what I'm doing. And it would not exist if I had not met him. It would be very minimal and probably kind of cheesy, because he's got me on the path that I need to be on, that I feel inside that I need to be on. The process, well, I think that I need to be having those conversations, and it grows out of that, because I don't know everything. And I'm like, you can't go to Rosetta Stone or Duolingo. It doesn't exist. And well, we had Don Greenfeather, who was chief of the Shawnee in the 90s, came through and met with Andequa, and this was a big help.
Shawnee language dictionary, cool.
Yeah. This is from the tribe, and I don't know if they wanted this to go out beyond the tribe or not, but I mean, you can see this stuff. It's very thorough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's grammar and syntax, not just glossary, or not
Right.
just vocabulary, right? So this is not unlike case languages like Russian, I would say. Whereas, we are in English very limited on cases. What is there, like 2? And
yeah,
and Russian has 6, and I think Finnish has like 12 or something crazy. This has a lot of cases, and once you learn the roots, the pronoun roots, the noun roots, and the plural suffixes and stuff like that, we used a game. Okay, I'll put it this way: we had a bunch of vocabulary, and you put it together, and it doesn't make speech; it makes words.
Right.
It's almost like if somebody were learning English, and I said, "Here's 28 nouns. Make a sentence out of them." That's what it's like, trying to recreate these Ohio Valley Indian languages. You might learn a few words here and there, and you know that like our closest bigger town is called Wheeling, and that came from a Lenaupe word about skull or head, because they had a skull on a stick that said, "We'll kill you if you come in here." So that's where the name of that city comes from. So you know that word, and you learn moccasin, which comes from Shawnee Macathena, and you learn Mississippi, which means big river in Shawnee, in Algic languages and things like that. And you learn these various words as an American, just because there's so many place names for it. And then if you dig into it a little deeper, you find these glossaries and these books full of, Native American languages, whatever. Here's one, a good example for you. Christian Indian prayer is so ironic. This is like always the thing of like, let's give 30 Indian languages, and all of them will be a translation of a Christian passage, which is so weird. But anyway, I could compare the different things in here.
Kind of a Rosetta Stone type thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, decoding the mystery. So I had this dictionary, and there's also this Ronald Chrisley, which in some ways I prefer. This is older, 1992. It's only older by 4 years than the other one I have. This is a wonderful book. This taught me a lot, and there's a lot about grammar and syntax, and there's a lot about case stuff, but there's more vocabulary, I'd say, in this one too. So I don't want to sound inauthentic with language, so it was really hard to like get the grammar part down, because there's not many people to check it with, and miraculously my friend knows like a million things with this, and so the problem was we have a group of people that are of mixed descent that would meet up. Some are Cherokee descendants, some are Lenape, some are Wyandotte, some are Shawnee, some are whatever, mixed, or Minkwa, Mingo is like a mixed blood type of thing, mixed tribe. So it's okay. Let's all get together and speak English is what it was. We know this word, and when I pointed this thing, it's Withigakwa, and when I smoke this thing, it's Sanitoga. But how do we speak the language? So the thing for us that got it further and got it to the point to where I could like make some song lyrics was this game called Where Are Your Keys? Are you familiar with that?
No idea.
No. Wow. Okay, this guy's name's Evan Gardner, in the Pacific Northwest, and he came up with this game, or somebody. It's probably based off of a native game. It's called Where Are Your Keys? And it was designed to protect endangered languages that may only have one speaker left, or 5 or 10 speakers left. And these are obviously native languages in Canada and the United States, mainly in the Pacific Northwest. But I've seen videos of them doing Abenaki, which is up in the New England region. So they're fluently speaking a language, from 400 years ago. It's amazing to watch these videos. So the way it works is you have these objects. He starts you out with a rock, a stick, a red pen, and a black pen. And you go around and you learn this base language, which is American Sign Language. You say, what is that? You say, that is a rock, that is a stick, that is a pen, and things like that. And then you start adding adjectives, black and red, and so on. And you learn the word for I and me, and yes and no, and can I have that? Will you give that to me? Things like that. You learn that in sign language as a bridge language. And once you get good with that, it's kind of like if you learn a card game, you could probably learn other card games. Once you know one card game, you just need somebody that's knowledgeable enough in that language to guide you through replacing what you're doing with your hands with the language. So it started being like, what is that? In Shawnee, what is that? That is a cigarette. Can I have that cigarette? Will you give that to me? Will you write this with the pen? Can I have that? Thank you. Things like that, because it gave us a structure for that language to exist, and the grammar fell right in. It's almost like how the language formed to begin with, however long ago, and it gets whittled away over time. We obviously weren't doing it perfectly, but at the same time, we were conversing. The first time, all these years of meeting up and being like, yeah, we know all these words, but we can't really speak it. We can't. We lost that. And none of our grandparents can really give that to us anymore. So, yeah, that's how it got to be, like on Oto, there's full sentences and things, not just words that I learned out of Chrisley's thing, but you got to be careful. You got to be careful. And here's why. This is the most underrated aspect of Native culture is sense of humor. We have people under duress in the late 18th century being interrogated by United States military officers saying, Washington wants us to come here and interview you to learn how to speak your language so that we can buy and trade. And so, that land over there that you have, like, we really want that. And we want to tell you in your language that we want that. And then you can go over here somewhere else. So to learn that language, they said, okay, I think his name's Major Denny. We need you to go interview these Shawnee chiefs, these Lenaupe chiefs. Sit down with them, give them presents, and have them tell you the word for this thing, and you write it down and you make us like a glossary so we can communicate. So you get things like, I think the word for captain or general that they gave them in that language was smallpox covered penis, I think was the word that they gave them for their cat. Right. So some of these aren't really authentic. So if you're learning stuff from a glossary from way back then, it's got to be correct. They were talking to these Indians. Well, they didn't always give them the correct word because it was really funny to give them the wrong word.
Sure.
So you got to watch out for that stuff too. You got to check your sources. So at the same time, to go into your question here, what I'm doing with these things in only one instance is really historically accurate, and that's on the first record. This Pilawa, which means turkey, right here. This is a song that I found out of a book from the early 1800s, and it was a white woman who was captured and either escaped or released. And later in life, when she was a senior citizen at that point, they interviewed her about her experience, and they said this was like a lullaby that they would sing to the children. And she sung it, and they wrote it in a notation, so I could recreate it from an old woman in the 1800s, remembering her experiences as a child in the late 1700s, remembering what these tunes are, and me hearing it and singing it and recording it. just the chain of events that would have had to happen for that song to survive. I think that it should be lost to history. And I was fascinated that there is actual music that exists of this Francis Densmore book too, but I think that's Seminole music, which similar language group, but I don't have any like tie to, so I'm not going to like recreate any of that music. But it's fascinating that you could come up with I don't know, maybe an acoustic guitar piece that takes that melody and you can improvise on an old tune that nobody's ever heard before. So that is an authentic thing. And the syllables that she gave them, that she sang as a kid, were those accurate? I don't know. I don't know if they're 100% accurate. It's hard to remember the details of everything from when you're a kid, when you're a senior citizen. It's as accurate as I can get. But the thing that I learned from studying this music, at some point, I should have brought this book up here. That group, the Loyal Hannah band group that I was part of for many years, they said, we need you to be the music guy because we need to do some dances for our Thanksgivings, and we need you to recreate these songs that are in these books that we have. Or this one specific book has a lot of them because a guy wrote them down in the 70s from visiting reservations. I said, well, I know how to read that, and they have the syllables, but none of the syllables make an actual word. They're called vocables. I don't know if this exists in other cultures too, but the song is not, they're not words, they're syllables, and they mean a certain thing, but they're not actual words. So that's where Heihona came from, was my take on, well, like, if ancient times hadn't changed till now and we were still writing songs like that, like, how would I write a song? What would it sound like? And that's what came out, that part. I was just really inspired to do that. So there's that. And then I knew this girl, this Shawnee girl from around Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, named Michelle. And she had, I don't know if this group is still active. I haven't talked to her in a while. It's called Mother Earth's Daughters, is her group. It's these ladies that sing some traditional songs, and there's some I believe some more modern songs as well, but there are Shawnee songs, Micmac, and Kickapoo, all closely related Algonquin tribes, Shawnee, Micmac, and Kickapoo. And when I heard these songs, I was like, wow, you really put that together well. You know these songs really, really well, and did great versions of them on a recording. Like, this is like gold to me, because most of the CDs that I see for sale are Western tribes. They're tribes that they're Eastern tribes, but they've been moved almost 200 years ago, and they've intermingled, and they're like a lot of intertribal songs, or there are a lot of Sioux and Lakota songs and things like that. And I love that stuff too, but I had a hard time finding music that pertained to this area and the history of this area and stuff that I'm connected to. So these were songs that I'd never heard before. And I got I guess a 10th generation copy of a CD by the United Remnant Band, Shawnee in Ohio. They flew to France to record these songs. I never understood that, but they flew to France and they recorded these. And there's some of the only recordings of songs that, some of them I haven't heard in person for like 25 years, and I have recordings of them. And this stuff is like super, super uncommon. So I got this list. This is a list of 69 songs. Oh geez, they're from all over. They're Micmac, Lakota, Shawnee, Lenaupe, Ute. Isn't that Utah?
Yep. Yeah.
Ute tribe, right? There's a Ute song on here. There's the Battle of New Orleans, which is not not a native song that I know of, but it could be performed at a powwow or something, and a lot of intertribal songs. So anyway, these are the lyrics that they compiled for all these. There's no actual written music on here, but the words to these these songs, this veteran song and flag song and stuff, and a lot of these are these vocables that aren't necessarily words. They're like syllables. And I guess you could say that a lot of other songs use that. They say, you know, hey, hey, baby, or something like that. You know, they aren't really getting like a necessarily a concrete idea. They're more conveying a feeling.
Sure.
And yeah, there's all kinds of other stuff that I got. I have stuff that I got online, and these are the lists. They're like, is this for real, or is this something that somebody told to a soldier 200 years ago as a joke? One other source I have here that I find quite interesting here for one reason. This is the book of Matthew from the Bible in Shawnee, and it's huge.
Right.
This is not a common thing that you can see. And this was written by, well, I should say transcribed. Written. I don't know who wrote the Bible. Isn't that like God, I guess? Like, you know, so this was transcribed by Thomas Wildcat Alfred, the grandson of Tecumseh. And following the War of 1812 and Indian removal and such, these people were moved. There are various parts of Canada, Ohio, Indiana, into the central United States, and were living alongside other tribes that they weren't living alongside before. And the difference in the language in 1881 versus 100 years before that in Tecumseh's time is remarkable. It's like from Spanish to Portuguese. The letters used, the dialect, I have a hard time even following this. It's much more Muskogee and Cherokee influence because of tribes they were living around. And I can't even follow it. Like, I can read a lot of stuff from older sources and from modern sources, but the stuff that they used in here, I'm kind of lost with this whole thing. So that influence in just a short amount of time was huge. And it might be the symbols that they were using too for certain letters versus others that I don't recognize in here. That's where, you know, I have a lack of linguistics training to see that. And, you know, when people put those in the universal pronunciation codes of like,
IPA.
Like, yeah, I'm like lost on that stuff. I know it's kind of like music theory. If I sat down and somebody explained it and I worked with it, I know I could figure it out, but I've never gone that far with this stuff. It's more cultural than general linguistics knowledge, I guess, you know. So yeah, that's kind of what helped me form this process. Sorry, that was like really in-depth answer, but
that's great.
I get really interested in this stuff.
So yeah, one of the things we did notice, like, you know, talking of the inclusion of some of these really ancient words in your lyrics, was that, you know, for starters, we did notice some patterns in terms of how much, you know, Shawnee and perhaps Lenaupe language is used in the lyrics. So as you mentioned earlier, you know, on Otto, there are like 4 of the 5 non-instrumental tracks that feature, you know, Shawnee or Lenaupe lines, and they're full lines, as you said. And 4 out of the 5 non-instrumental song titles are also in those languages. But then we noticed that, you know, when you get to the heart of Akamon, there are slightly fewer. Like I think 2 out of the 8 songs have Shawnee titles, and 2 tracks have just a couple of Shawnee lines. And then songs from your split release with Panopticon include, I think, only a couple of words that are non-English in The Red Road. And then lyrics off your latest release are almost entirely English medium, if I'm not mistaken, with only one part of one of the lines from the song Kanawha Black written in Shawnee and Lenaupe. Did you consciously reduce the number of Shawnee or Lenaupe words in your lyrics over time, or was this just something that happened with was it more natural?
I think it was more natural. I think a couple things is that I didn't want to be pigeonholed as, oh, that's that band that they do the Indian stuff or whatever. Like, I don't know. I didn't want it to become like a thing that we had to rely on or something like that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, more realistically, what had happened is I was talking to a lot of people in that language at the time, and some things fell through with that group, personal issues that were coming up with people, and I no longer had anyone to talk to. So that was it. You know, like I said, you can't go on some online forum that, you know, is learning Croatian and talk to random, hey, let's work on our Croatian. You know, it's right. It's not a widely spoken language. So anyway, I wouldn't say lost contact, but there was a lot of kind of darker things going on with some people at the time that I had, had a lot of good experiences with prior to. And like I said, with the where are your keys thing, getting to where we're actually having conversations, I felt like I was getting somewhere with it. And then I was like, well, I'm kind of stuck now, you know, and I could throw some things in there, but for the sake of some of the songs, I don't know. I felt like if I did that, I'm not a native speaker, and I didn't want to force it just because I could. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Some places it felt really natural to put in, like the chant with Tanner Anderson at the end of Lost of the Trail of the Setting Sun. Wishi Katwela Kaweshi Lawepa is like is kind of our rallying call. Let us be strong and do what's right. And that felt really appropriate there. And then there's other places that are like, am I going to just randomly start calling something in the song this name and like not use it any other times or something? So my goal going forward with Oto, I was like, I'm really going somewhere. I either want to do an entire thing in this language and do it properly and make sure that the grammar and stuff is right, and it's not just me stringing things along hoping that it's correct, mm-hmm. or I kind of don't want to do it. You know, as bluntly as that is, it's like I didn't want to half-ass it. And there are some times where some things come in there and it does feel appropriate because it's something that I feel confident on, that this is a correct terminology and I feel passionate about it. But if I'm not confident on something, I'm not going to pretend that I am. And it's kind of a case-by-case basis. Is if I can explain this thing best in my native language, which is English, then that's what I'm going to do. So I don't know. I've been in a weird place with that because whereas for a long time I felt really empowered and I don't know what the word would be, by using words from the language and being able to actually converse in it. It went to almost being like sad when I'd start using those words because of some other things that were going on mm-hmm. with the group that I was close to, you know. So without going too much into that, it kind of fell apart for a while, and so I'm hoping that those connections will get, you know, remended, repaired. So yeah, I hope that answers that. But yeah, it became by the time I did the linguistics work to make sure that everything's fine, it's kind of like the initial burst of creativity that gave me the song in the first place. It's like the wind gets sucked out of it. Like, well, how do I make sure that, you know, all these lyrics have that theta symbol for the THs and stuff, and the S wedge, and like, you know, make sure all this stuff is authentic. It's like, do I need to be doing all that? Or do I want to do it because I want to get better at the language? By getting better at the language, I feel like I'm not there. I feel like I'm pushing myself beyond my means to write in some language like that. Even other languages I've studied, I don't think I'm competent enough in them to write music in. But we'll see in the future. I also, over that span of time, had a lot less free time for this stuff. Had a kid. Took on about 3 more jobs, got a master's degree, several serious relationships and such. And so busy life. And I guess something's got to give at that point, and studying this language to the degree that I was before kind of fell off a little bit, but not necessarily my songwriting. So it's one of those things to where it's always there and you can always pick it up, because it's kind of like, well, I've been dormant for 200 years. I'm right here. Just speak me and you'll learn more about it. But in the meantime, are you communicating in general, you know, conveying the idea? Because I don't know if anybody else out there knows that language. I like to preserve this mountain dialect as much as I can. But at the same time, I don't know if people understand what those words mean. Some people would, but I think the majority of our listeners don't know Algic languages, you know.
What about the more sort of specific cultural, geographical, or historical references that you bring in? For instance, you do mention, outside of, you know, using full lines, there are cultural items or concepts which, and I'll probably butcher these pronunciations, so apologies, but schemata for a net or basket being unraveled that you mentioned earlier in this interview. Kisela Makong, everything being in its place, and then there's specific place names like Kanawha.
Yeah, that's
River.
that's like our general, you know, God.
Yeah.
You know, Sheila Makong, like the spirit the spirit that flows through everything, like the God, the universe concept. Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's all right. And like you also have song titles, I Can Die But Once, which seems to be from 1909 book, The Battle of Point Pleasant, A Battle of the Revolution by Livia Nye Simpson Poffenbugger.
Yes.
And so what's the purpose of integrating these specific references to places, cultural items, and historical events? What effect does it add to your storytelling to link in these specific items, even if your listeners might not be familiar with what they mean or where they are?
Well, yeah, those are pretty specific or pretty obscure references. Offenbarger's 1909 book. Yeah, that's like not on a lot of people's bookshelf next to John Grisham or something, right? Patterson. So Point Pleasant is where my ancestors lived in the late 1700s. And there was a very significant battle that, in fact, I think, not to go too much into it, a lot of people consider that the first battle of the American Revolution. It was Virginia at the time. This was before West Virginia split from the big Virginia. And I just visited there not too long ago to see some grave sites and the battle site. That battle was a big deal there. It was a huge defeat. That's where Tecumseh's father was killed. And what had happened is that Cornstalk, this was another chief during that time, was one of the people involved with a treaty where the settlers, the white settlers, were supposed to stay east of the Ohio River, and they were supposed to stay west of the Ohio River, and everybody will get along just fine if you stay on this side of the river. Well, people don't stay on the same side of the river. They go over and they hunt, or they go over here and they do this or that. Well, so if you only have a certain amount of territory to hunt, and that's your main source of food, and these people start coming over where they're not supposed to be, and they start shooting at you, and they start killing all the animals that you need to eat to survive. Well, that causes a lot of problems, and it pissed the Shawnee off really bad. They said, we can't tolerate this. We signed this treaty to where they're supposed to follow these rules. We're supposed to follow these rules. Well, they're not doing that, and we're not going to take it anymore. If they come over here, we're going to kill them. So Cornstalk comes over under a flag of peace across the river to this fort, and he says, I can't control my men anymore. You need to keep your guys on this side. I come over here in peace to tell you, like a warning, like, I don't want this to happen. So they immediately took him prisoner, and his son and another man that came with him. And after they were imprisoned, some people broke down the door, barged in, and just killed them in cold blood because they were Indians, not because of the purpose they were there, a peaceful purpose. So that story and that sept of Shawnee is the same sept the same smaller subgroup that my family came from. So I've always been really close to that story and a great admirer of Cornstalk. And I thought at some point I need to write a tribute, a eulogy type of piece for him, like we did with Tecumseh, and like we did with Chief Logan or Tulgayita on the first album. And that's probably going to continue because these people deserve to have monuments, even if they're musical monuments to them. Their stories are fascinating. They're very important historical figures, and they get overshadowed by people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and such. So I like to bring their stories to life. And at the same time, you got to remember, I'm writing music, I'm writing an art form. And when I research this stuff or read about it just because I'm interested, things pop out to me as poetic. Mm-hmm. Supposedly, they're like, okay, you took me prisoner. Well, so what? I can die but once. Go ahead and kill me. I'm going to die sometime. And I was like, what a badass. Like, that guy was just, I don't know. It really inspired me. This guy is such a courageous leader. And now, is that stuff apocryphal? Did he actually say that? I don't know. But, I would think that those are based on actual interactions with people. I don't think somebody would make that up. I don't know. I could be wrong. But I thought, there it is. There's the title of the song. I can die but once. Go ahead. Bring it on. Go ahead and shoot me. You cowardly whatever. I'm can't go anywhere. I'm trapped in here. I came over here to be a nice guy, to try to help. So if this is my time to die, well, then today's a good day to die. That's what I took from that. So that's where that title came from. That's why I used that. There's other things too that they just scared the crap out of me, like traversing the shades of death. The shades of death that's a real thing. I think it's like a shopping plaza now in a Walmart. Yeah, it takes some of the romance out of the whole story. But I have a friend named James that lives out there, and when that album came out, he wrote to me and he's like, hey man, like, I know this place that you're talking about in this song. I live right by there. It's like a shopping center. They drained it. It was a swamp. But that was actually about a group of settlers that in the Wyoming Valley of Pennsylvania. And they got a false alarm. Another village had been attacked by Indians, and somebody had said, they're coming your way. You need to run. Well, they really weren't. So they fled out of fear, and they got lost in the woods, and they got stuck in this swamp water, and they got eaten by panthers, and some of the people drowned. Some people died of fear, like heart attacks and stuff. And I just pictured that in my mind, and I'm like, I got to write a song about this, So you store that stuff away for later, and then that song, the music for that song, that was one of the first songs we did for Heart of Akamon. When we first started that record, it was like, this is such a mess. This is this album's gonna suck so bad. It's got like all these scattered parts. We can't figure out how they go together. And through some luck and magic, they ended up adding layers to it. And I was like, these parts of this song remind me of like just walking through mud, just something like that. And I remembered that story about the shades of death that vast swamp in Pennsylvania that these settlers got lost in because they fled in fear. So yeah, I guess it's obscure historical references that I read about that I'm like, I wonder how many people know this story. Well, there's going to be at least a few more that know about it now, because I'm going to write something about it at some point in my life.
So are those references then kind of an invitation for the listener or the lyric reader to go and do the kind of research that you yourself have done?
Yeah, and it's happened more times than I can count.
So
And
like, you mean fans coming up and sorry, you mean like fans coming up and talking to you about it?
Oh yeah, and then they get reading about this, and then they find that they can't put the books down, and they're like, I had no idea, like I never learned this in school. This is amazing. Like this is the most interesting stuff. And I'm like, yeah, it's the culture that they didn't want you to know about, because they wanted white culture across America to be predominant. So yeah, this history is super interesting and super cool to learn about. But yeah, you're not going to learn about it in school. You're going to learn for 12 years how awesome, the presidents were.
Yeah.
So does this theme of kind of like trying to keep the language alive, trying to keep stories alive, is that also part of you have a few songs where you have taken lyrics from elsewhere, like All Night May I Roam is a translation of a Lakota poem. Pilawa is a traditional Shawnee song. You mentioned earlier in this interview some times where that the song that the woman remembered and that you now sung.
Yeah, Pilawa. That's the same one.
Oh, the same one. Okay. So is it like, is there any effort that goes in, or do you feel a need to like find specific poems that feel metal, or is the goal here again kind of just that sort of preservation, even if it's in a form that obviously the people that made these songs would never have ever imagined?
A little bit of both. I like to read. Well, I mean, I don't speak all these languages, so they're almost always English translations of native songs, chants, poems, and stuff like that. So in my mind, it's a tribute type of thing. I'm not trying to like capitalize off of someone else's culture. I'm like, that's a beautiful poem. It kind of sucks that it's in a book from over 100 years ago that has dust on it, figuratively and literally. Nobody might be aware of this, and it fits the cadence or the flow of this riff that I came up with so well that this song that I wrote from my heart, I want to dedicate to these words that I think are really powerful. That song in particular, that's one of my favorite songs ever. Not just the song that we wrote for those lyrics, but the lyrics themselves. There's not much there. Like in quantity, there's not a whole lot of lines there, but it says so much, and it's just so simplistic but meaningful at the same time. It kind of sums up everybody's existence. There's daytime and then there's nighttime. If you were just to strip it down, against the wind may I roam. When the owl is hooting, may I roam. At dawn, may I roam. When the crow is calling in the morning, when the crow is calling, may I roam. Like, I find whenever I'm not roaming, whenever I'm not moving and growing, when things are stagnant, just my life doesn't seem as meaningful. That doesn't mean that I need to like travel and go far away all the time. I think it's just like figuratively moving, just not keeping the same monotony in your life constantly, but breaking it up, learning new things, and trying things in new different approaches and things. So I think Andrew introduced that. He said the song's about never sitting still, always roaming, always trying to get better at things, and he summed it up really well when we played that live before. And I'm trying to think of some other examples where we've done that. I don't think we've done that for a while. We've gone more into just all original lyrical territory. We did get some stuff from the Walla Mollum on The Crossing. on Azimuth's, the beginning of that, because a lot of people have deemed that book false and, fictitious and such, but I thought the scenes that it portrayed were very inspiring and seemed to really fit that acoustic build up at the beginning of the song, and then to write my own interpretation of how that story made me feel.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really crossing that bridge from playing in previous metal bands and stuff. Both of us were in a band called Angel Rust for quite a while, and I wrote some songs. So there's a song called Totem, there's a song called Hammerstone, and they were about indigenous societies and ancient times and things like that. And I thought, I really like to write about this stuff. I'd like to do that kind of full time with the project, even if it's not metal, and like explore this more. Well, the first album was all acoustic, and did pretty much all the parts except for one vocal part, I think, that Andrew did on there. And then on the second album, we started adding metal elements, and we were real nervous to do that. Like, what about the people that liked the first album? Are they going to be like, why'd you make this metal now? And then some of the people that listen to it that like the metal elements are like, yeah, it's cool until you start playing all that acoustic stuff. So that was like a really confusing album. There's a bunch of different scattered ideas. Like, if you sit and just listen to it for what it is, it's really cool. But if you're in the mood for a metal album, you're going to be like let down. If you're in the mood for an acoustic album, you're going to be let down. You just got to take it for what it is. And that was like an essential stepping stone for us to do. It seems like the more we integrate things within the songs, the better they work, in my opinion, rather than keeping things separated. But yeah, I'm highly inspired by some of that other stuff. It's from cultures, and when the brief time that we were on Nordvis production in northern Sweden, and learning about Sami culture and how similar Sami culture is to Native American culture, we learned a lot from that, and some of the Scandinavian bands that explored that. It seemed like at the time, this is a few years back, people were exploring that as much, if not more, than people were exploring American Indian culture in metal bands. And I was just blown away by the similarities, not really in language, but the similarity in lifestyle and diet and approach and connection with nature. It's like super similar. And it makes me think, are we related ancestrally through the North? Like, people came over from Alaska, people came over the Iberian Peninsula, people came over from what's now Russia and Scandinavia into Greenland and then into North America. Are we all like the same? If you go back far enough, or are we all the same indigenous culture, or does it just make sense to live connected to nature? And that's like a natural state of being that's been weeded out of us by dominant, like, imperialistic cultures and things like that. You know what I mean? Like, no, you will not be close to nature. You will conquer nature. And we have more guns and weapons, so we will be the predominant culture. And then other people who were part of pagan cultures and stuff that were real close to the earth and real close to nature are, small minorities, but they still retain that. And again, my question for you in Australia is, are there bands doing this that are of Aboriginal Australian descent in metal?
Yeah, like there are some, not as many as perhaps there are in the North American context. But yeah, there have been, like, relatively recently bands in Australia and especially New Zealand. There's a New Zealand band that I'd love to speak to called Alien Weaponry, who are a Maori band.
Okay.
As well. Yeah. So similar.
They've had the biggest international success, I think, of any
absolutely.
of them.
They play them on Liquid Metal all the time on Sirius XM. I've heard them several times, and I think I know what you're talking about. For some reason, I thought it was like Polynesian or something, like a Pacific Island type of. Well, I guess.
I mean, depending on your perspective, Australia could be a.
Yeah. I'm talking like Fiji,
Yeah.
Micronesia type of area. Yeah.
No, they're from New Zealand.
Yeah, they're Maori. Yeah. Yeah.
It's an island.
I mean,
yeah, that's great.
on a big enough scope, like North and South America are one big island, right?
You know, I don't think we're connected to anything else, are we?
No.
It's a really big. It might be the world's biggest island. I don't know. It might be Asia, Europe. I don't know. I need to be looking at a map right now. Yeah, really, really big islands, but eventually they're all going to grow back together again.
It's all just a series of large islands that we've arbitrarily attached names to as they get bigger. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, as you mentioned, references to nature and the significance of nature for a lot of Native American cultures, that is certainly something that comes across very clearly in a lot of your lyrics. There's a lot of like repeated references to nature, in particular rivers, creeks, forests, earth, and sky, as well as animals like the serpent, panther, coyote, and birds. So we're wondering, what's the role of these motifs and why are they important to your lyrics in terms of their connection to a lot of the kind of Shawnee and Lenaupe traditions and culture that you've discussed?
Well, streams, that's the big thing, because those were the roads around here. The waterways were the roads. It's the quickest way to get from point A to point B. And a lot of them have the same names that they had a long time ago. I live, in fact, I can look out my window here to my left and see the Ohio River. And that is an Indian word. It's not the Shawnee word. That was Spele with Thipi, and we don't call it that, but we call Mississippi, the Mississippi. That retained its ancient name, and this stream flows into that one. So a lot of these creeks and streams, I feel, are like, the arteries and veins of the earth, and they're the places where I like to spend the most time. If I'm not on a trip, far away visiting some place that I don't normally go, or to the beach, I love to go to the beach, and I love to go to national parks and things like that. But if I'm just like, okay, I'm off work today, or I want to go get some fresh air, some nature time, I'm always going to one of the creeks around here. My son loves to swim in them. And as far as the animals, those are the things that you're most likely to have an indigenous name. Raven, fox, turkey, deer, hawk, things like that, and clan names as well, such as the water panther clan. Some of these things are the actual animal, such as a panther, a large cat, but a water panther is a more spiritual thing. It's an underwater panther that more closely would resemble a reptile, and a feathered serpent, which would be flying in the sky, but resemble something like a snake type of a serpent, reptilian type of thing. And this landscape is used to be just covered with signs of these things. Out in Ohio, there is what they call the alligator mound, but we believe it's a panther, and it goes hand in hand with lore, and again the serpent. And you can find connections between these things with what they align to in the sky or with the sun, and what they align to on things like the solstice. How the sun would line up through the eye of a serpent or through its mouth. And these things are huge. I mean, and there's a reference in the title track of our song, the hidden meaning only seen from the sky, in the title track of our new record. I can't stress this enough, that in Ohio, there are things that would not make sense from the earth. They only make sense when you're flying above them, the aerial views. And how did they build them? How were these made? How are these circles so perfect? How are these hexagons? And how are these earthen walls that go for 60 miles parallel, so perfectly parallel for that distance? How did they do that? How did they line all this stuff up? And a lot of it's a mystery, and a lot of it is tribal lore, basically, that there was help from that came from outer space that helped them design things. And all that stuff's really inspiring, because it's like, well, if that was the meaning of life back then, it must have been pretty important. If you would spend 100 years making a mound, like they estimate this, the largest mound in North America, it's about a 35-minute drive from me, and it's huge. I've been on top of it a bunch of times. It's called the Grave Creek Mound, and they estimate that it took 100 years to build that thing. And it had a moat around it and stuff. And then later cultures out in Ohio would make these earthworks that made designs, and they were everywhere, and a lot of them are gone now. A lot of them were mapped by Squire and Davis in the 1800s, and I have map books of these things, but they no longer exist. They're like farms and shopping centers and cities and things like that. There's very few of them left, but the ones that are left that I've been to are like, one, how did you build this? And two, why is it an effigy of this certain animal? So if those things were that important for that long a span of time, the only reason in my mind that they're not that focused on now is because our society has shifted to be focused on money and power, fame, what else? I don't know, clothes, whatever people are like into, cars. Yeah, modern culture. We're not close to the earth anymore. And I guess in truth, I want to be closer to it than I actually am, because I am part of modern culture, and I do have jobs, and I have a kid, and I have need to make money and stuff like that at jobs. So this is my escape. This is how I can get closer to that, even if I'm like feeling guilty inside that I'm not as close to it as I want to be, and I'm not going out in nature, and I'm not speaking the language as much. I'm not praying and giving thanks as much. We're all full of our things that we want to be better at and that we're not. So this is kind of, I guess, a means of atonement that, I want to be more involved. Like, I want my life to be more like that. And sometimes I think, I was born in the wrong century or something, but I wasn't. We all say that, but yeah. This is how I stay close to it, is by thinking about it and writing it, and having these songs come out. I'm like, I can't wait to see what comes next that is going to turn into a song, and then write something meaningful about it with these things. And all the while I'm learning about these things too. So it gives me several things. It gives me an outlet, but it's kind of an opportunity for me to learn about things too and get closer to it. So I think was there another part to that?
No, that was it. Yeah.
Okay. When we're talking about these kind of these investigations, we noticed that like the way that you paint these pictures of these things that you're saying that that are important to you, these images of nature, does seem to be fairly straightforward. I mean, if we go back to the carcass discussion, your lyrics are definitely easier to read than a carcass.
I would hope.
You'd hope. Well, so you'd hope, right?
Like,
so the line,
like,
the thing there,
the putrefaction era carcass.
Yeah.
I think
a little tricky to read. Yeah. But so you say that you would hope, right? So is this kind of a goal? Because we found that like your lyrics are fairly straightforward. There aren't, like lines like from the serpent tradition, as we've learned from the past, as has been foretold, a great serpent from the sea arrived on these shores. These words are all words that, the average English reader would be able to understand, but they are kind of told in a way that doesn't say match kind of day-to-day speech. And some words like foretold, abode, atop, upon, do have a little bit of an archaic feel. Like, again, you wouldn't say, it's atop the tower. You'd probably say on top of, right, in day-to-day speech. Is this kind of a goal of yours to have something that's easy to access, but also has a bit of kind of I don't know if you call it poetic, archaic feel to it, or is this kind of just what's happened?
Very interesting. I never really thought about that before. I think that since this is the type of stuff that I read, a lot of this stuff is very old, and they do talk like that.
Okay.
It's archaic by nature because it's from a long time ago. That's the stuff that I'm influenced by in a literary sense, more so than, I mean, I love Steinbeck. I love like a lot of the classic authors, maybe not super old. I don't read like Dickens and stuff like that. Nothing against it. It's just not my thing. I like slightly newer stuff when it comes to fiction, you know, and even modern fiction writers too. But if I'm on this subject, a lot of the stuff's really old, and a lot of the books that I collect are super old and rare. And you know, I might have to get a reprint. I almost said repress, like it's a record.
Yeah.
Get a repress of a new Carcass album that I never had back then or something. These reprints, these historical things that I find, they're a gold mine of information. And yeah, I guess that's how they talk in those. But at the same time, like you made a good point, and I never really like had a conscious desire to do that. I guess I don't know how to answer that. I would say that when we sit and kind of proofread the lyrics, if a word sounds clunky or it, you know, awkward, I think that, you know, I'd ask Andrew his opinion and might say, oh, maybe phrase it like this, or maybe reverse the words, put it in maybe an active voice rather than a passive voice. And I had some professors in grad school, and this is recently. I went back to grad school 2017, and I hadn't written like papers and things in years, and my writing sucked at first, and they kind of called me out on it. I'm like, oh man, I need to like relearn how to write and use proper grammar and use more sophisticated language than just like a text message to somebody. So atop, upon, things like that, I started exploring more words like that. I remember that specifically. You're talking about stuff off of Akamon. That was before that time. So I think that through writing the stuff with the split with Panopticon and the stuff for Kanal Black was a little more refined because I'd been writing a lot and I've been paying attention to the words that I was choosing a little more. But that I don't know if I set out specifically to give a certain I don't know, literary vibe to it or something, but I don't know. It's kind of like if a band is using like an archaic font or something, like an old English or something for that look, or maybe like make it look like it's printed on parchment. A lot of these like pirate bands and stuff, you know, they're not going to make it look like it's like a computer font. You know what I mean? Like digital. It's not going to look like Somewhere in Time. It's going to be like
feel more metal, like in a way.
Does it feel more metal to use more archaic words? Well, yeah, a lot more metal than saying, dude, we were down at the beach and we saw this ship and we're like, these guys are assholes. They're going to take over our country. You know what I mean?
Sure,
you got to like put some sort of like, I don't know, poetic license to how you phrase it, I guess. I think it kind of does. It's what I would like to hear. Maybe going back to Bolt Thrower again. I would think that, you know, from their country of origin, it's pretty proper English to begin with, versus, you know, I grew up with a lot of slang English in West Virginia, where it's almost like a Pittsburgh meets Southern type of accent type of thing, and we have our own particular slang for things. So I don't really use that in the music. Some people might like to use the slang from where they're from. I think I like to be a little more, I don't know, proper or formal. Maybe formal is a better word than proper.
When I write. Is there something weird? Sorry to interrupt. Is there something weird about a genre that again is associated with, quote unquote low culture, right? And the desire to be formal, like this link between metal, which has, like things are different now, but the Academy, it's always been metal is
well, today still think of it that way, even if that's not reality, right?
Yeah, it's the the metal's the low culture, quote unquote, which I don't agree with, but that's the opinion. It's like it's not real.
Yeah.
But then there's this thing that metal artists keep putting these formal terms in rather than the local, and there seems to be a contrast there, right?
Yeah, well, regionally, where I'm from, I know country is huge everywhere in the U.S. now, but this was one of the birthplaces of country, with the Grand Ole Opry was from Capitol Music Hall down in Wheeling, just below me. My grandma listened to old country. I'm talking, the Carters and Loretta Lynn and Hank Williams and stuff like that. I don't mean like the more modern country, but the more informal American English of country music is like what I heard a lot, and I didn't like it. I didn't like hearing like she thinks my tractor's sexy and stuff like that. So that's country music was a predominant thing around here, and I'm like, I don't want my music to be like that. I want it to be a little more formal, and just the subject matter too. I don't think you can be very slangy about stuff like this. Maybe a good example of how you would be Rooster by Alice in Chains. That's a little colloquial and slangy, but it's about Vietnam. It's about a Vietnam veteran. That's one way you could do it, but I don't know if the subject matter that we're making music about would come across well that way. But as far as what you're saying about, is it strange that there's a genre that's considered, these guys are evil, devil worshiping, loser type of people or something like that, using this really kind of highbrow language or word choices and things like that? Yeah, that is kind of a weird linguistic paradox, I guess you could say. Aren't we supposed to be the people that are into drugs and the devil and stuff like that, and we're actually smart? Yeah.
Or at least we're trying to look like we are.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that other people aren't, but I'm just saying that metal lyrics in general and metal topics are some of the most intelligent things, for the most part, that I've ever heard. And I think it's extremely intellectual. Yeah.
Also, to kind of wheel back a little bit, you mentioned that your partner for the band encouraged you to stop using passive voice and stuff. And actually, you wrote a question to note that you like, or at least especially on the new album, there's a lot of verbs ending in ing, like the kind of active voice. The new album mentions rising smoke, seeing figures, crushing the neck, the sky growing dim, speaking in tongues of man. Is this also a tendency you've noticed? Is there a reason that you, like when you tell a story, of course, you can tell the past tense, but you seem to tell their stories as though they're happening while you're singing them. Is that something
you're talking about the new record?
We noticed it on all of them, but the new record especially, there's a lot of like, this is happening now sort of framing.
I'll show you what it is. I'll show you exactly what it is. If I can find it. It's this thing. It's this.
The elements of God. Okay, the elements of style. Oh,
this little teeny book. I had to read it in my undergrad stuff, and then I read it again and enjoyed it more the second time. It was assigned to me in college, but I bought this again and read it on my own for grad school to try to improve my writing. And his main thing is like, put it in the active voice. Passive voice sounds kind of lame, I guess, according to Strunk. So yeah, I think maybe it's subconscious, but I think that I took this as like, this is how you're supposed to write English. This guy, like, this is the guide for that. So I hope I was right about that. I hope I didn't like make my writing worse. But I think that was drilled into my head early on, was the passive voice doesn't sound proper, or like it could be said better if it's, active. And I mean, sometimes it's sneaks away from you. Sometimes it's not obvious. If it was like, he sat in the chair versus the chair was sat in by him, nobody's going to choose the second one. But sometimes you do like a figure of speech that's passive, and it may not work the best for lyrics. But then again, lyrics aren't just like literature. Sometimes they have to be twisted around to make it fit the music song. So that's like super interesting to me that you noticed that, because I don't even think I ever even thought that there was a lot of, I don't look for patterns like that. I guess I don't analyze my
No,
music.
I mean, that's our job,
It's
right?
interesting that you did.
I never thought we'd see a copy of Elements of Style mentioned on this podcast.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, speaking of other patterns that we saw in your lyrics is, we clearly saw that there's a pretty consistent use of rhyme across lyrics that you've produced, stretching back from like Oto all the way to, your most recent release. And yeah, if you look at some of those lyrics off Oto, you can see rhyming lyrics like, as the morning sun appears, arise to begin the day, in its light and in its shadow, walk in a sacred way, off the track Hey Hona. Fast forward to your most recent release, and we can observe similar patterns in lines like heads hang low, patience wearing thin, branches grow, but the sky is growing dim, from the opening of I Can Die But Once that we mentioned just before. So what would you say is the role of the rhyming then in the storytelling of your lyrics?
I don't know. I don't want to just say that, like, I think a poem should always rhyme. It definitely is not the case. And there's been other, lyrics that we've done that don't. But I don't know, it has a good feel when I make a good rhyme, and it's not just like a dumb rhyme. Something that, like, a million people have used over and over, trying to think of something cliche, and I can't right now. But when I come up with something that seems to fit the music, it seems to actually say something with meaning, and then it rhymes without sounding cliche. I feel like I've hit a home run. I feel like, check mark, that's cool. And then I read it to Andrew and I gauge his reaction. If he's like, I like that, that's really good, then I know he'll tell me if something's stupid or if it sucks, he'll tell me. So yeah, again, he's like my proofreader for this stuff. And when I come up with that and it sounds good, I get really satisfied, and it feels like it rolls into the next one, and then I can come up with the next one really a lot easier than the first one. So I hope I don't think about this too much and get like a complex. Quit rhyming so much. Quit saying ing.
No, none of this is bad. None of it, like, these aren't critiques. These are just.
I'm joking. No. I'm just being goofy, but those are really interesting things, and I can't tell you how flattering it is that anybody cares that about anything that I wrote. I never set out to do any of this stuff and expect to be even talking to anybody in my town about this, let alone in Australia. That's pretty cool.
Oh, we're glad you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Thank you for caring.
Another thing that we noted is that you have a pronoun selection that's kind of changed over time. In Oto and Heart of Ackerman, you often use the first person plural we, us, and our, and occasionally he and you, but never I. Conversely, though, in lyrics from Kanawha Black, you use I almost exclusively, with very few uses of we and us. Was this a conscious shift on the new album to speak more from the first person's perspective, assuming that perspective is you, or did, again, this just kind of happen?
I think it's related to an earlier question that you asked about not using Shawnee and Lenaupe words as much. I feel like I'm kind of an island, you know. I feel like I've become a really doing this stuff independently rather than as part of a tribe group, you know, which brings some sadness, but doesn't end anything for me. It just makes me feel a little more lonely. And you got to remember what Nechochwen means in the first place is, you know, I've been kind of walking my own path with this kind of stuff for a long time, sometimes with help and brotherhood, and sometimes a little more isolated in it. So that might be one reason for that. It's definitely not conscious or intentional, but it's very telling. You know, I feel like it's kind of like almost like a psychological examination of things that have been going on in my life. Like, wow, man, it's very telling. It's like, yeah, kind of personal stuff that I didn't realize I was even maybe revealing. It's just, yeah, like you said, just kind of came out that way. And honestly, even thinking about it now, I didn't even like realize that or anything. But yeah, definitely on Oto, that we were pretty active group at the time. We were active in the late 90s for a good bit, and there were a lot of problems that arose. And then kind of all those people kind of fell off the face of the earth for a while, got involved in their own things, good and bad. And then I did the first 2 albums, and then I get a message. This was on MySpace at the time. Man, you're putting this music out as Nechochwen. This is really cool, and like you did this and you did that. And I'm like, yeah, let me send you the CDs. And reading the liner notes, like, wow, like you got all this from the stuff that we're doing. I was like, yeah, that's highly influential to me. That's like my life, you know. And so Oto was the third thing. So it was highly influenced by reconnecting with those people. And then the same problems crept in, and I'm a little bit isolated again, and but with a lot more knowledge. I guess that's the best way that I could put it. So I guess you could kind of do a diagnosis of like, you know, what's going on in this person's life, that their lyrical approach is kind of shifting. You know, I've studied that with other bands and stuff, but you know, it's been like Pink Floyd or the Beatles or something like that. You know, you can see definite like eras or periods in their careers where, you know, if you study what the band was into, it was something traumatic happening or drugs happening or whatever it was that was influencing it, you know. So
So we were wondering, like, given that you've just said there's a connection between your pronominal choice and what was going on in your life at different periods of time when you were writing these lyrics, we were wondering as well, though, like when you sing songs, when you're, you know, telling stories that involve I and we in the lyrics, like, do you ever see yourself embedded in those stories? Like, even if they're events that you're describing have happened, you know, hundreds of years ago?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, I do. I do. It's weird. There's you know, I don't know if it's in the lyrics or not, but there's a concept called l'aqua. It's kind of like time, but it's like time moving sideways rather than forward and backward, which is modern society probably like a really hard to grasp topic, or kind of vague to like, what's that mean, sideways? And it's kind of like your soul. I don't want to sound like reincarnation, nothing like that, but like your soul's energy has been involved in things very, very long ago and will again very, very far into the future. And sometimes some things will pop up in your life that are too much of a coincidence to be like, oh, that was just a coincidence. It's almost like a reminder of an event that you were somewhat part of at some point. I don't pretend to fully understand the concept myself. I've spent most of my life trying to grasp the native concept of Lakwa. And so yeah, I guess that's probably the big source of the lyrical ideas, is hearing the riffs and hearing the songs being put together, and they're instrumental, and it's like, well, what's going on in this song? It's like, well, this particular one, I picture a young kid getting thrust into war at like 11 years old and running down a hill in hand-to-hand combat with some, American soldiers or an enemy tribe or something like that, because that stuff happened a lot. I picture that, or picture something like oh geez, what's one of the other songs? Like I was talking about traversing the shades of death. This what would it have felt like? What would it, to be stuck in this swampy area or something? Or I picture Pekiko Leletiwe, the last song on Oto, of a boy going into a vision quest. It's not autobiographical, and it's not necessarily talking about me, but I'm picturing first person view of this, kid on like a ledge for days, like picturing these things around him and being visited by spirits, and getting messages from the spirit world. So yeah, I definitely, when I'm listening to the songs and coming up with the lyrics and it's starting to formulate, I'm picturing myself right there for sure. I don't know how you can write songs without being part of them. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like that would be an integral part of writing a song, is you have to connect with it somehow. But I suppose some people just write songs and they just write songs and that's it. They're not necessarily doing any like deep immersion into the song subject or something.
And with some of the gore songs we've talked about, you kind of hope they don't connect with it, right?
Some of the which ones?
Some of the gore songs we've talked about, you kind of hope that they actually don't connect with it that much, right?
Oh, yeah, man, yeah, that's, yeah. And if they are, that brings up another question: is that like purging thoughts so they don't do it in real life, or is that like a big desire to do those things, and then at some point they're gonna like hack somebody up and put them in their freezer?
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, our little metal scene here has had very few people actually murder anybody, so it seems to be more perhaps purging or just having fun. But
that's true.
There's always a chance, right?
That's true. There was a band, I just saw a documentary on it not too long ago, and I can't remember what they were called. The guy killed somebody, but yeah, it's fairly rare, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot more screaming about murder than actual murder, which is, good.
The way you want it, really.
Yeah, it's the way you want it. Yeah.
Outside of historical war scenes, I it's not something that I personally want to write about.
Yeah, and even when you do, right, you don't really like talk about it in the sense of, really gory, graphic descriptions of violence, right? That's certainly what we saw in your lyrics.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's kind of implied. Like, I want you to come up with that in your mind and picture that. Like, that's been one of the main goals all along, is like, what did it sound like, smell like, taste like back then versus now? What were the visceral qualities of life back then, and to try to somehow bring that to life in music, it's not an easy task. And again, back to the metal thing, it really conveys that kind of dark stuff really well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because I would like to hear some country and jazz songs about brutal murders. Nobody's going to do that anytime soon, but it would be interesting.
There was an Australian comedy show that did a smooth lounge version of a Cannibal Corpse song, which I think you can check out on YouTube. And it's I wouldn't listen to a full album of it, but it's a funny
fun concept.
Fun concept. I think it's Hammer Smashed Face as a lounge track.
Wow.
So
yeah, the thing with that album is, at least me, I didn't have the original of that. A friend of mine had it, and I didn't have the lyrics, and I couldn't tell what he was saying. There was one part I thought he was saying coffee in your coffee. That's what I was like, I don't know what he just said. I think it's something in your coffin or something. I said, I think he just said coffee in your coffee. So yeah, but years later, reading that stuff and Butcher to Birth and stuff, is like, this is pretty nasty subject matter. And there's other bands too like that.
Well, the last topic that we wanted to address with you was, of course, we can't not talk about the fact that the majority of your albums and even individual songs appear in your lyric books with accompanying detailed descriptions of the cultural and historical context of the lyrics. For instance, in the liner notes for Oto, they explain its role in Algic languages, the symbolism of its symmetry in relation to the album's themes, and even mention a similar term in Greek. And these descriptions are wonderful resources, particularly for people like us, for accessing the meaning and motivation behind the songs and entire albums. But we were wondering, what was your motivation for writing them, given that there are so many bands out there who would just kind of leave it up to fans to initiate their own research into the background of songs?
I guess this is twofold. The quick answer is, I think the subject matter deserves it. And it's not that big of an endeavor to just write about it and give some background information. When I first started teaching at the college that I've been teaching since 2005, I remember my kind of introduction out there was, I did a little classical guitar performance. And one of the professors, as I was playing, said, "You should tell us about some of the songs that you're playing." Because I was a little more shy back then, and I would just play through these classical pieces like a lute sonata or something, or some Spanish pieces. And I was used to playing background things in restaurants and stuff, and you just play the songs and people hang out. Well, they were actually like watching, like it was a concert, and I wasn't used to that. He's like, "Would you tell us about some of the songs that you're playing, because we don't know their titles?" And I was like, wow, that's a pretty important element of it. It's like when you go see a classical recital, they always have a program, at least over here they do. They always have a program with like a little bit about the composer, or like a little interesting anecdote about the piece or whatever. So that's one part of it, is that I think that the topics deserve some sort of synopsis, or some sort of overview of what it's about. The second thing is that for me, when I first started playing guitar, beyond the basics, learning how to move my fingers and very rudimentary things, I thought, okay, well, these are really awesome bands that, like, I've got their tapes and CDs and stuff, and like, I'm learning Peace of Mind, I'm learning Ride the Lightning, I'm learning Seasons of the Abyss, and like, okay, now I'm going to go on to this one, learn this Death album, learn to play it. Like, when do I get to make my own stuff? That was always the thing of like, okay, you've moved beyond playing other people's stuff, you need to contribute your own stuff to the world. Well, when I started reading this historical and linguistic based indigenous these books, when I started reading these books, I got the same feeling. Like, you need to contribute and participate in this genre. But I don't think that I'm equipped to write historical books, at least not in this stage of my life. These people are so good at it that I don't know how I could possibly contribute something of the quality of Alan Eckert, or some of these historical writers from the 1800s, or these people that went to different reservations and cataloged all these language things and broke down all the grammar and stuff. Like, how am I going to do that? So I thought, I'm going to essentially write historical narratives with music. And that's how this project got its beginning. And Dark Horizon Records in Indiana was putting out an Abigor 7-inch, and the band Fog was one of theirs, and Flauros. They were just black metal across the board. And heard my stuff and was like, look, if you put out a classical guitar type of thing, because they put out 2 October Falls albums that were all dark classical stuff. I was like, I'd love to do that. He's like, we'll put it out. We would love to put this out if you would put together an album that's just you playing the classical and acoustic guitar with your dark themes and stuff. You can make it about whatever you want. So I thought, okay, cool. I could put my own album out. Like, what am I going to make this about? Well, what am I reading about every day? I want to make songs about that. So basically that first album I felt was like my historical narrative, but without it being a book. It's like the musical equivalent of that, if that makes any sense at all. And so there's a short synopsis in that one. And then when we did this one, Azimuths, this is a much longer, much more involved album. It's an hour long, I believe, or close to it. We got a friend of ours to do the layout instead of just a guy in Indiana that said, here's what I have for you. Give me a little blurb with your thanks list. And I thought, I'm going to write an introduction to this about what the album's about. I said, you know what? Next time I'm going to take this further. And we ended up with this 16-page book. And our friend James came up with these really cool designs here on his own. I didn't even say we want this or that. Came up with this like the sync face and all this. And so each song has its own synopsis. And it would be really, really weird to not do that now. Like that, to me, that's an integral part of the album. And I mean, you can download that stuff from a digital version of the album. Like anybody that wants that stuff, I mean, just email me. It's free. I'll send you pictures of it or whatever, scans, I guess, of this stuff. But I think without the physical product, you're kind of missing an element, because I like to sit with a book. I don't like Kindles and ebooks and stuff like that. I've tried. It's just not me.
Yeah.
I do have digital albums, but not everybody puts out a synopsis that comes with their album anyway. So as long as you got the cover, sometimes you're good. Other people, I have a Death Spell Omega album, and I swear that book with is like 64 pages or something, but I don't think there's a lot of text on it. I think it's more like designs and stuff, if I remember right. Yeah, and then we continued, and obviously this one wasn't all about us. This is about Panopticon too. So there's a two-sided sheet in there. We each got one side. So even though there's only 4 songs that we did, I wanted to make sure there was a synopsis.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if there's one on the back of that 7-inch. Here's a little bit of when you're talking about the Oto record earlier. Here's the original cover I drew for it. Nobody's ever seen this before.
Oh,
I pulled this out of my. It's crooked. Yeah.
That's rad.
It's kind of primitive, but I wanted the cover to be a circle, and that ended up not happening. But yeah, I've never showed that to anybody before, but it was in my.
Thank you.
It was in my record cabinet. I was like, I gotta leave that on the cover. Like that's my own copy that nobody else has. So yeah, that sheet that was inside there, I wanted to be, a thank you list as well to all the local Native people that have taught me things over the years, as well as synopsis. And I think that was one of the more detailed ones. And the new one's going to have that too. I think I sent you that. Did I send you the synopsis? Kanawha Black?
Yes.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Okay. I thought I did. Yeah. So that's going to be a really nice gatefold record. We've never done a gatefold before, and it's going to have that spot UV stuff that's kind of like I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. I didn't even know that term. Have you ever had a book that's like, this isn't an example, but let's say that like the blue here, the and the of, if they're real shiny, almost like they put like a sticker type of effect.
Okay.
That's spot UV, and it's going to have that on certain parts of it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. The live Panopticon has that. Their live record they put out a couple years ago, and they're like, this is a really cool effect. You guys should use this on your new one. And I was like, yeah, let's try it. So I'm looking forward to how that package comes out. And that should be in here within a month, I think. They should be in. It takes a long time to get records in.
Yeah.
It's really slowed down. Yeah.
Well, just kind of to tie all these ideas together, broadly speaking, if you were to sum up, the Nechochwen's music, like what would you say is the role of language and lyrics in your music? And I guess more broadly, what do you think is the role of language and lyrics in metal?
Wow. Well,
it's a big question, right?
It is. I would say from this perspective, there are very, very few all instrumental metal bands that hold my attention, and that's not meant as an insult to any of those bands. That's probably, I don't know, maybe more telling of myself, but there are very few. Like I love that band, The Chasm I was talking about, and they've gone completely instrumental with the past couple records. And I mean, it sounds awesome and stuff, but I miss the vocals as well. And they're kind of like the glue for me. They're the thing that holds the whole thing together, and that's not just for metal. Funny though that I listen to like instrumental acoustic music, like fingerstyle, really good fingerstyle Celtic type guitar and stuff, and I'm fine listening to that for like a long period of time. It doesn't need any words or anything. But when it comes to full band stuff, yeah, I like to have some lyrics. As far as my own stuff, you say what is the role overall of lyrics?
What is the role of lyrics? What is
Of
the
language?
Language, yeah.
Of language. I would say that early on, there was a big desire to use these ancient, not just necessarily modern stuff, but like mound builder language, Hittite, early Algic languages, early various languages that are defunct now, and the frustration of trying to properly use them, it just makes it really difficult to do. And I still want to do that some more, but I'm gonna need some help. I need some help from my friends from that thing, because I need to get back into that, because what is language? I mean, active language is kind of something that's spoken.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this stuff is not spoken. I mean, sure, there's a lot of languages that fall into that category that people study, but do they speak them? Yeah, and as a side note, you really need to check out that Where Are Your Keys stuff, because they're speaking these languages that have been practically dead, and they're like fluent in them with this. It's amazing.
Yeah, well.
But the role of language for me is, I hate to admit it, but it's kind of taken a back seat to the storytelling and the quality of the poetic statement that I'm trying to make, or the story that I'm trying to tell, the message that I'm trying to get across. I'm not just trying to, I don't know. I think that I'm more concerned now with the message that I'm trying to get across, or the story that I'm trying to tell. So I'm relying more on the language that I know the most, which is English. I would love to add some other things in, but I think that the themes have gotten deeper, especially on this new record. And I find it harder and harder to use those languages to convey what I'm trying to do. So the message and content is taking priority over either linguistic exploration or preservation. That's the best way I could put that, I guess.
Makes sense.
Yeah. with other bands, or the role of language in metal, like, I don't know. This is a weird thing too. I ask myself this question all the time when it comes to native languages, because most of the people I know in this country speak one language.
Mhm.
And a lot of the people that I know in other countries speak like a bunch of them, like a lot, especially my European friends can speak like 5, 6 languages and it's nothing. I'm like, how do you do that? You know, but it's really common. So, you know, in this country, only speaking one language, I think of a band. Again, I'll use Amorphous as an example. They're a Finnish band. I love to hear Finnish spoken. I think it's a really awesome sounding language, and the case system fascinates me with it. But bands like Amorphous didn't sing in Finnish; they sang in English. And on that first record, their English was really not not perfect English. And that's not a slam. I'm bringing that up because I love the charm of how their English sung words sound on that album. I really enjoy it. I really, really highly enjoy it. And it has a charm. And I always think, what if they had sung all the stuff in Finnish and I wouldn't have been able to understand any of the words? I would have loved it. But the fact that they made that effort to teach me about Karelia and to teach me about Finland and its history, and they reached out to me in my language, English, I hear like how hard that must have been learning a language, because I don't speak any languages as fluently. And I've met those guys and I talk to them in English and I'm like, I know nothing in Finnish. You guys amaze me. Your grasp of my language, and I know nothing of yours. So I think it's amazing how many bands from other non-English speaking countries that I grew up listening to. And I love when they sing in their native language, and I love when they make, you know, this effort that they didn't have to do. They didn't have to do their music in English, but I can understand what their place is about because I don't speak their language. That amazes me. Um, yeah, and I do have to say I've had a lot of people reach out to me with some of the native languages used on our records, that they have interest, appreciation, questions about it, maybe connections that they have to something with it. And um, above all, this is kind of like a little side note to your question, Wes, but I from the very beginning, I said that my role of this, since I can't really write books, or at least I've never gotten anywhere with that, and I'm just going to make like albums that are the equivalent of that in some way, and the synopsis that's written in there will be kind of my explanation for things rather than just like a whole written book. I wanted to connect with people that knew more than I did, that might know more about Point Pleasant and this area of Mason County, West Virginia, where my ancestors are from. And then even before that, when they were in the Laurel Highlands of Pennsylvania. And I thought, you know, this would be really cool if Dark Horizon puts this first record out and we maybe get it into a museum shop, gift shop, or something like that. Or maybe I could go to somebody's book signing that's writing one of these historic books and, you know, play my music in the background or something. It's grown to so much more than that. And I've had so many conversations with people in all these like tons of countries and tons of different areas of the United States. I'm like, I never thought it would turn into that. But that's still the mission for us, is that we want to spark conversations. You know, we're not like these big, this isn't all about social justice or political correctness or philanthropy or anything. It's about knowledge. It's about like, we lost some stuff, like we want it back. What are these details that we lost? And We're not happy about why it was lost, but we can't really do anything about that. But maybe we can do something about getting it back. So I think that's one of the big roles of this, of language with us, is to spark that conversation, So, yeah, sorry, that was kind of a stream of consciousness thing there, but
absolutely.
It's a great way to wrap up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting that these stories are preserved, and something that is so modern and different, something that would not be recognized by the people telling these stories. But it's just it's cool that there's something like metal out there that can preserve stories.
It is the first live thing that I ever did with this was Heathen Crusade 3 in St. Paul, Minnesota. This was back in 2008, and it was just me playing acoustic in between the who did they have? Ancient Rites was there, Woods of Ypres, and there's like tons of really good bands there, and one of them was Metzatol. I don't know if you know Metzatol from Estonia, and the dude had a cannel. It's like this handmade instrument from 4,000 years ago. Well, not the design was not his actual instrument. He built one. He had things, they were like bagpipes basically that he made, and they played all these traditional instruments on stage along with metal instruments. And I was like, that could turn out really bad potentially. They were excellent. They were amazing in how they incorporated their traditional Estonian culture. And I'm not talking Soviet Estonia, I'm talking Estonia itself. And I had a conversation with that guy afterwards, and I learned a lot about Estonia just through a simple conversation. Whereas I don't know of any other scenes that are like that. And not to pick on pop or country or whatever, but I've never gone. Well, I don't really go to festivals for that kind of stuff. But if I did, I don't think I'm going to meet somebody from Estonia playing in a band, playing ancient instruments and telling me about his culture. It's metal is an amazing vehicle for, I think a lot of us are huge nerds about history and when things were cool, and when you could cut someone's head off with an axe. We're kind of in love with those eras and the brutality of how things used to be. And a lot of people think life can be superficial nowadays, and things were real back then. And, we lived off the land, and whatever it is. I mean, I would think that's why Viking metal is so popular. People really latch onto that because there's a historic element. There's like a badass element. There's a, the look of that culture. Everything is really appealing. I think there was that whole documentary series, the Viking series. Right. And so there's a lot of bands, and I think the first one I heard was Unleashed. That those riffs were those chugging riffs remind me of like a Viking longship, So I didn't really necessarily know of any counterparts of that of all other cultures, but would you say alien weaponry is Maori culture? Is that how you say it? Yeah. Cool. So they represent. That's pretty awesome. So that's what I'd like to do for this area as well. It's very specific geographical region with a weird and dark history. So I suppose what we'll continue to do, but I think along the way we're getting a little more philosophical with lyrics too. If you compare like The Crossing on Azimuth to like Across the Divide from the new record, there's kind of a night and day difference from a historical perspective to like just the philosophical universal message or whatever of wandering and making peace with where you're going.
For sure. All right. Well, so the new album is coming out quite soon. I believe actually it'll probably be out before this interview comes out, I think, right? When's the drop date for the new one?
Release date is Friday, May 13th.
Oh, just about a similar time then, yeah.
Which I believe will be Saturday, May 14th for you.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And if people want to check out more of your band, more of the projects, where's the best place for them to go?
Probably our Bandcamp page. It's you can just go to Nechochwen.com and it'll take you there to the Bandcamp page. And we have all of our stuff on there that can be purchased digitally. And the digital stuff is great, but like I said, we have these nice booklets and things with our records. Unfortunately, I'm sold out of a lot of stock right now. We're getting to the point to where some of this stuff needs repressed, which isn't a bad thing. It's kind of the first time in my life I can say that. We have a handful of some CDs, some Azimuth CDs right now, but I'm almost out of most of our CDs and most of our records. There is, I'm being told, repress of Heart of Akamon on vinyl coming soon. And by soon, I mean out there soon, and then wait for however long that wait is going to be. So hopefully that wait will be getting smaller and smaller as we get out of pandemic times. I hope.
Yeah.
And I'm being told a first time ever issue on vinyl of Azimuths, which would have to be a double LP because it's about an hour long. So that's pretty exciting stuff to have coming out. And I'm writing some things now, trying to find the time right now to get some songs together, doing a lot of teaching work right now, and looking forward to some time over the summer where I can dig into that a little more and get some new ideas out for all of you to listen to.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Yeah.
We will also be at Fire in the Mountains in Wyoming this July.
Oh, okay.
And, that thing is like a symposium kind of thing. Enslaved is doing a big Viking. I apologize. I don't know a whole lot about the subject, but they're going to do like a historical, cultural presentation, and there's a lot of involvement with like healthy food and activities, art, things like that. It's not just bands, but there's some great bands playing at this one. So if you are, I guess you don't have to be in the area. If you're interested in it, fly to Wyoming. We'll play an acoustic set there because we do not have a live metal lineup at this time, and I don't know in the future if we will or not. It's something we've kicked around, but I'd rather focus more on making records. It already takes us years to do that, so hopefully I can speed that up in the future.
Right. And so where's the best place to link our fans to find information on that and your releases?
I don't know. That's horrible. I should know that. Yeah, we have our Bandcamp page that has that stuff. Like it has all the albums you could at least hear digitally.
Yeah.
The Bindrune website has a lot of stuff, bindrunerecordings.com. And then, for more informal type of stuff, our Instagram page is just Nechochwen WV.
Okay,
cool.
Great.
Yeah,
right. Those are our links in the description.
Yeah, we had this discussion the other day when we met up. I was like, how important do you think it is for a band to have a website? And I don't know if I have an answer to that. It seems like, how often, maybe you go because you study this stuff in depth, maybe you go to bands' websites often. I do not. I think I was on Voivod's website the other day, and that was the first one I was on in years. I think I usually go to a Bandcamp page or what's that thing? Metal Archives, I guess.
Yeah.
For sure. I think it's the same for us, maybe. Like at least for a first point of call, Bandcamp and Metal Archives or Metal Kingdom have been very useful.
Yeah, it's nice to see a web page that at least has like a collection of all the links and stuff like that. Like even if I've seen people's websites that's literally just like, here's links to all of our stuff. the end. And it's like, all right, well,
At least
fair
everything's
enough.
there. Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, no. I mean, literally, thanks for that. Like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I don't have
Yeah.
to find it all. Yeah, you know,
Exactly.
all
Yeah,
one little
that's
area.
cool.
Yeah.
I would like to have all these, album synopses. Is that plural? Synopses,
Yeah.
synopsis. Up in one page. That would in one place. That would be really cool. I'm really lazy with that kind of stuff, to be honest. Getting those things together, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll write the songs and make the album, and somebody else do the like technology stuff. That's, I need to get I guess more educated on how to do that stuff. So, but yeah, there are other things out there, and I think most people are going to like a Bandcamp page to check it out, and it's one-stop shopping. Okay, here's what albums they have. I like the sound of this. I'm gonna buy it. That kind of thing. So maybe someday we'll have our own site.
Well, cool. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for having me, and for reaching out to me in the first place. Reach out anytime. Keep in touch, and I'll be talking to you sometime soon about your broadcast here. So,
Wonderful.
okay. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Okay.
Thanks.
Care.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to Lingua Brutallica. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you stay tuned for our next episode. Before we leave, we just wanted to acknowledge that this podcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.